Hello. It's Monday. Once again, the weekend is over. We just keep on trucking in this capitalist system. It's another day, another stream in fascist America. Welcome to whatever this is, an attempt at providing education, advocacy, and a little common sense in this digital wasteland. I'm Aubri Devashrayee. As we do on Mondays, we'll go over a current event roundup. The current event roundup? It's current event roundup, where we go over current events. Off to a great start today. So, as usual, there's a lot happening, and making sure that I'm getting to the highlights of what's going on in the world. Oh boy, it is Monday. It's difficult to pare things down, to edit and decide what is most important. So this is why on Tuesdays I kind of let the current event coverage bleed into what I have planned for Tuesdays, just to make sure that I'm getting to everything. Thursdays are going to be dedicated mostly to education about organizing, community organizing, unionizing, labor, updates, announcements, information, education. So you can stay tuned for that, because this is how we protect ourselves. As there is a lot of electoralism being focused on right now, which I'm not someone that says like electoralism doesn't matter, that elected officials don't have an impact on our material conditions, because unfortunately they do. But we do also need to be focusing on the necessity for outside pressure when it comes to hearing from we the people who are in the working class, who are doing the work each and every day to try to better our material conditions, demand what our human dignity deserves, and highlight what so many badass people are doing in this work. So, if you ever are wanting me to highlight information that is going on with organizing, especially when it comes to labor or just general leftist news, things that are not being covered in the mainstream media, because surprise, surprise, they don't really do this a whole lot. We don't really have such a thing as leftist mainstream media. We do have some independent outlets that are not bought and sold by corporate interests, but we also are needing more independent voices speaking out against what is going on, speaking truth to power. So, I have some tea, and it is a jasmine lotus tea combo. Something that I love on the lotus tea, it's made in India. It's just like extremely Asian to have this as part of the instructions, but on it, it says to steep the tea for like 10 to 15 minutes and to not, in all caps, put any sweeteners. That's not only just like very Asian in general, but especially when it comes to like desi teas, people are like, don't fuck with what works, okay? And I agree, but I just wanted to share that tidbit. All right. So, since I like to start off with a humorous video, we've been watching some of these episodes, podcast episodes, these faux podcast episodes, satire, that are created by The Onion on, just the topic of these true crime murder podcasts that they can be extremely exploitative and perpetuate these same systems that they're claiming to want to provide critique on. So I have been enjoying it. I can't remember which day it was last week. Went over the first episode. I think the one that I watched initially was episode 3 because I didn't realize that they had like a whole series that they released on the same day, which like that's a lot of work for them to be creating this. Why are you releasing them all on the same day? But I mean, I'm not complaining. I guess just like putting my media hat on. Putting my media hat on. Like, why aren't you like spreading it out? But, you know, I'll take it. I'll take it. So we'll probably rewatch, re-listen, review the third episode. That was the one that I started with. But today we're on episode 2 because we haven't listened to this yet. And the name of this faux podcast is A Very Fatal Murder, which is funny because, like, as if murder is not fatal ever. So, let's give this a watch. Then we'll get into some headlines and coverage. I'll probably break some things up with all of the heaviness and bullshit that's going on globally, nationally, statewide. So, let's embark on this.
When I think about the murder of Haley Price, there are 2 things that are important. There's what I know and what I don't.
Haley Price, 17 years old at time of death, 5 feet, 5 inches, life cut short in senseless act of violence.
I know that this is the most compelling murder in America. I know that the victim was a supple young girl in the prime of her life. And I know that she was killed by simultaneous gunshot stabbing, strangling, drowning.
Ew. It's so true, though. This, like, fetishization of young women, especially when it comes to young white women, especially if they're blonde, blue eyes, like, let's be honest, how there is this fetishization of their murders, where it's like, they had a promising future, she was prom queen, she had a scholarship, and how that's just viewed as, like, acceptable, just kind of, like, common, which, I mean, you know, in patriarchy and with patriarchal violence, that is common. But yeah, the focus on a very particular group of women while neglecting to cover all of these other kinds of murders by ranking them in a system of being like, this is the most important, is really genius for them to be highlighting. Not just genius, but like that just is a very real factor in what is going on with the coverage of these murders.
Ethel, have the police charged anyone with the murder?
No charge.
Ethel is supposedly this AI system, like as we're talking about AI and the proliferation of all of these data centers nationally, statewide, globally, and these nuclear power plants as well, all of these nefarious centers that capitalists are building without any sort of oversight, really, any sort of checks and balances, any repercussions for the negative impacts that they have. It's just like very rich on the nose, maybe a little bit too on the nose, but good to be highlighting as well that like this person is using Ethel AI specific to finding interesting murders.
Have been brought. David, would you like me to email police with recommendations of people to charge with the murder?
Not yet. What I don't know is who did it and why. I don't know why the Bluff Springs Police Department hasn't been able to catch a killer in a town of 11,000. I don't know why Haley was wearing another guy's class ring even though Brian is the total package. I don't know how many Pulitzers I'm going to win for this podcast. But this week, I'm looking for answers.
911, what's your emergency?
A full moon?
Horrible. Just horrible.
I'd keep an eye on Calloway if I were you.
What do you mean Haley's dead?
Oh my god, you didn't know? From The Onion and Onion Public Radio, I'm David Pascal, and this is A Very Fatal Murder.
Bluff Springs Police Department, under our Special Investigative Unit, is doing everything within our power to apprehend the person or persons responsible for ending Miss Haley Price's life. We are deeply committed to bringing this criminal to justice and peace to Miss Price's family.
That's Charlie Jameson, the Bluff Springs police chief, speaking at a press conference the day after Haley's murder.
We arrived at the crime scene at 6:37 a.m. and began our investigation. We searched the area, started talking to neighbors, and asking if anyone saw anything suspicious. By 10:30 a.m., we had brought Brian White in for questioning.
He's talking about Haley's boyfriend, Brian, the one with the great hair and eyes you could get lost in. I'm sure you remember him. Brian was held at the Bluff Springs Police Department and questioned for several hours on May 10th, the day of Haley's murder. But the thing is, Brian's a really great guy. This was my first hint that the Bluff Springs Police Department had mishandled the case.
He was a great guy. Okay, so what's the proof? Just so focusing on that. His looks like, this is the popular guy. He has great hair and beautiful eyes. Okay, calm down. Like, stop. Stop, like, already being on his side. Like, this is contaminating what is happening in the case. Like, bias anyone?
Going off the information we had, we thought he had a motive to do it because Haley was wearing another boys' class ring. And we thought maybe something had happened with the two of them. But Mr. White was cleared a few hours later.
And why was he cleared?
His alibi checked out. There was 7-Eleven security footage of him filling a recycling bin with slushy mix at the time of the murder.
I asked Brian about this experience, and he told me it wasn't the first time the Bluff Springs Police Department
just doing, like, dumb, like, teenage shit. Like, especially, like, very teenage boy-coded shit.
had mismanaged a case.
You are receiving a call from Bluff County Jail.
I mean, it's like a daily freaking occurrence now. They're always looking for some reason to bring me in here.
What did they get you for this time?
I wrote out Haley Price, RIP, and lighter fluid on the football field and set it on fire. I just fucking miss her, man. The day she died, I was gonna promposed.
Brian told me he'd been arrested 12 times. He said that sure, he got into trouble every now and then, but he wasn't a bad kid.
I wasn't even
Of course, he's a white kid as well. It's like, I wonder what would have happened to a kid who had melanin in their skin, who was filling up this recycling bin with slushy mix, who also had been arrested 12 times and, like, nothing else happened to them. Class, race, gender, the intersections thereof are very revealing that I'm glad they're touching on.
Prize, man. Honestly, they just think we're bad kids for, like, seriously no reason. I mean, right after they were done with me, they went after Alex. Like, what the fuck?
I loved Haley, obviously. Like, we're pretty much sisters. We got matching inner lip tattoos and everything.
Alex Thatcher was Haley's best friend, and she was a person of interest for a time too, but Chief Jameson admitted that the police didn't have much to go on, other than the fact that she had vomited and said that shirt is disgusting when she was asked to identify Haley's body. Including Brian and Alex, 7 suspects have been questioned by investigators, but not one person, not one, has been charged with the murder of Haley Price. Benjamin Clarkson, the foreman at the factory where Haley was found, was arrested, but he was let go after authorities searched his phone and computer, discovered he'd been having an affair at the time of the murder, and ruined his life. Martha Vuolo, the owner of Fur Corral, the pet store Haley worked at, was a person of interest too.
Mrs. Vuolo is such a bitch. Like, Haley just wanted the day after prom off so we could do a really good post-prom, and Mrs. Vuolo wouldn't let her. She totally had it out for Haley, probably because she was jealous that Haley had an actual life and actual friends. Yeah, actually I bet she did it. Wait, can you arrest people?
Martha Vuolo was cleared when she provided time cards, proving she had been working like the
Those are quite the accusations.
Then there was Haley's debate teacher, Larissa Monk. She and Haley were friendly, and Monk was the last person to see Haley at school that day.
Miss Monk was cleared. She was having sex with a student at the time of the murder.
And what about the Mars rover, who authorities suspected because of the Martian soil under Haley's fingernails?
Jesus
Collecting data
Christ.
from Mars at the time of the
Just dropping that casually? Oh my god. And is anything going to happen to her?
murder.
And Keith Paulson.
A black man we saw walking in town one day. He was eventually cleared.
I wondered,
Yep,
where had the
see,
Bluff Springs Police Department gone wrong?
That's accurate
What
to
had
real
stopped
life.
them from bringing justice? There was one thing, too, that really stuck out to me as so odd from the conversation I had with Chief Jameson. He said he didn't have any podcasters on the force. In fact, no public radio report.
Also the fact that they're like talking to all of these people, and they're like so easily dismissing the boyfriend when like we know how a lot of the time it has to do with like interpartner relationships, and they're focusing on all these women. Not to say that like women aren't capable of being cruel or murderous, but also that it is much more likely for men to be killing women than women to be killing women.
Had ever so much as looked into the Price case. That was pretty staggering to me. With so few resources put into podcasting, how could the town of Bluff Springs trust that investigators would solve the case? How had they dropped the ball on something so obvious? Because if they had had a podcaster on the case right away, they would have asked the most important question. What about W.O. Calloway? Did you ever question him?
No, I don't believe we did, and he's not a suspect at this time.
But that's where Chief Jameson was wrong. Because Calloway was a suspect. I had already written his name in big block letters with lines underneath it on the big whiteboard I used to map out my stories.
Well, it's
This
official
episode
then.
of A Very Fatal Murder is brought to you by BrickShorts.com. Hey Ethel, have you heard of BrickShorts.com?
Yes, David. It is all the rage online.
Whoa, cool. So what is it?
Brickshorts.com is a domain name that is available for purchase. It can be yours today.
So I can put any content I want on BrickShorts.com? Even those embarrassing photos of the two of us?
Ha ha ha. But yes, David, you can do that if you
AI?
own the domain.
Awesome. Well,
It's sponsored by a domain that isn't owned by. It's so absurd.
I better hurry, otherwise one of our listeners will snap up this brandable website before I do.
Ha 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 ha. Yes.
BrickShorts.com. It's a domain you can buy to host your website.
Ha ha ha
Picture
ha.
a fan. Now double its
When
size.
you need AI to laugh
Double
at
it
your
again.
jokes.
Now double
Maybe
it
that's what I
again
should
and
do.
add 10
Just
feet.
kidding. I'm not doing that.
Sorry, you're not
Nor
even
should
close to
anyone.
the size of a wind turbine. This is the sound of the wind turbine in Bluff Springs, the one I noticed my first day here. Just like the murder of Haley Price, the wind turbine looms over the entire town. It feels ever present. The more I thought of the turbine as a murder, the more I understood rural America's resistance to green energy. But I still didn't understand who had killed Haley. There's still so much I don't know. So much I don't understand about the turbine.
Just like
How does
a
it convert wind into electricity?
nonsensical
And what
metaphor.
happens if it's not that windy? Does it ever spin the other direction?
Oh,
I don't
sorry,
know how
simile.
it works, but just like the murder of Haley Price, it's got W.O. Calloway's name on it.
Hello, David. What can I help you with today? A. Find new murder case. B. Background research. C. Bounce ideas off each other about how the Bluff Springs Police Department has dropped the ball.
B, please, Ethel.
Certainly.
I needed to find out more about W.O. Calloway, so I asked Ethel to research the Calloway family and look into any potential links between Calloway and Haley. It turns out that the Calloway family has been here in Bluff Springs for generations. They originally founded the town as a shanty town to accommodate the workers of Calloway Industries.
The Calloway family is associated with several businesses, including Calloway Ranching, Calloway School for the Blind or Idiotic, Calloway Digital Marketing, Tropicrazy Soda, Calloway
W.O. Calloway's grandfather, W.M. Calloway, built the factory that Haley was found in back when Bluff Springs was still a booming industrial hub. See, just about everyone in this part of the country worked in soda, specifically an amphetamine-laced orange soda called Tropicrazy. Bluff Springs was essentially built on Tropicrazy money, and the people of Bluff Springs are still...
On soda, that is so American. Tropic crazy, and it has amphetamines in it. Yep. American capitalism.
nostalgic for the days when a young man could go down to the Tropicrazy factory and get a job with no trouble. But when health lobbyists in big cities like New York turned the public against Tropicrazy, the industry suffered, and so did the people of Bluff Springs. I was starting to understand how, even though he almost definitely killed Haley Price in cold blood, the town of Bluff Springs could still love W.O. Calloway. In their simplistic minds, he represents the orange-tinged days of yesteryear, when work was easy to come by and soda flowed freely. Eventually, instead of closing the factory, the Calloway family scaled back production to bottle caps, which they still produce and ship all across the country. But with the recent increase in robots replacing white working-class people, most of the employees have been laid off. Okay, so I'm at the Bluff Springs Public Library, and I'm just trying to find out whatever I can about the Calloway family.
That tidbit that the employees are replacing white working class people, as if just the great replacement theory, not like, oh, people weren't working these jobs and now people of color, especially immigrants, are being exploited for their labor here.
This library is actually the Callaway Memorial Library. The librarian told me he donated the money to build it as long as they agreed to invest in an extensive collection on human anatomy and diseases. The librarian, Mrs. Lennox, also helped me find a bunch of articles about the Callaways, dating all the way back to the Bluff Springs Chronicle's first issue, in which Callaway was the answer to the jumble.
This is all about the Callaways and the police. They've always been pretty big supporters of law enforcement. My hubby Rob is on the force, and he's always saying how much he likes to go over to the Callaways' house for training.
Training? Like police training?
Oh, yes. Well, I think it was W.N. Callaway. He built the police station himself out of scraps left over from his mansion. And now W.O. likes to have the officers over to run drills on his property. He has got
Just
a
all
whole lot
the
of land and almost none of it's swamp.
initials
so it's real useful.
of these people, all the various iterations. It's like, oh, are they just going along the alphabet? WN, WO, is the next one WP, WQ.
Hey, do you have anything I can look at on microfiche?
Very indicative of the capitalist
and he said
class.
It's true, but he told me it doesn't happen too often. He said the Callaway was always really nice to the officers, having cookies and lemonade sent out to them while they were training, but that they never saw him, probably so they couldn't make him out in a lineup.
Here's an article right here
Yeah,
from 85.
Like, well, he's nice to us. They never see him. He's actively bribing them.
Callaway heir suspected in murder of town lunatic.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my god.
Then the next days.
Younger Callaway walks free? Huh. Looks like the courthouse is called Callaway Courthouse. Callaway opens up about life, love, and second chances. Oh, wow. Here's a picture of... It's like a bunch of kids wearing these overalls that say Callaway on them. Huh, okay. It says Callaway Campers? Callaway Campers is a long-running youth enrichment program in which children are taught survival skills, like how to build shelters out of discarded bottle caps and light their clothes on fire for warmth. I scanned the rows of bright smiles and perfectly pressed uniforms, and there, third row, smack dab in the middle. Is that Haley?
Poor little dead girl? That sure is her.
Poor little dead girl is wild.
Next time on A Very Fatal Murder.
W.O. Callaway? I used to be in love with him, but he sued the shit out of me.
Sir, you need to put the recorder down. Please put the recorder down.
Color America! Blue Color America!
Visit our website for more information about the show and to check out Brian's senior pictures.
Just
they
kids
came out great.
picketing.
Plus, tweet your theories about how Callaway murdered Haley with the hashtag Callaway did it. I'll read all of your theories, and who knows, one of them might be interesting enough to make it to the podcast. A Very Fatal Murder is brought to you by me, David Pascal, and Onion Public Radio. Now I want to talk to you about another podcast from OPR. Did you know that the United States used to be part of England? Whoa, history is so cool. Oh, and did you know that gigantic lizard-like creatures once roamed the Earth? What? These insane facts are the kinds of things you'll learn every week on the new OPR podcast, Truly Insane History Facts. Join host Audrey Chen every week and find out cool stuff like who the very first president of the United States was, and even what year Jesus was born.
What?
Subscribe to Truly Insane History Facts today.
Because no one knows.
It's like listening, but with your eyes. And if you subscribe to The Onion
Reading.
right now...
You're reading this like listening, but with your eyes.
Receive 12 monthly issues of our award-winning newspaper to listen to with your very own eyes. Go to membership.theonion.com now to hear more.
All right. I've heard this is good. That Mallory McMorrow is actually being confronted by Matt Bernstein and Emma Vigeland, and that needs to happen because she is a centrist that originally was seeming to be like, oh, I'm a little more left of center, but no, like so many centrists, there's so much disingenuous pontificating on things that like she's willing to switch sides on. This is why so many people are like, I would rather have you come out and say like you're right wing than pretend to be centrist or even leftist when like we know that you do not hold any sort of principled convictions. Okay, so there is that. Shall we get into the headlines after we've had a little chuckle? Get into seriousness, the depressing events of what's going on planet Earth, but also talking about the things that are necessary for us to be aware of. Let's do it.
Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report.
Thank you.
I'm Amy Goodman.
Thank you, Amy
President
Goodman.
Trump's escalated his threats against Iran Sunday, posting on Truth Social, quote, "For Iran, the clock is ticking, and they better get moving fast, or there won't be anything left of them," unquote. Ceasefire negotiations remain deadlocked over Iran's
Just
demands
more
for war
genocidal
reparations, an
threats.
end to the U.S. bloc.
More genocidal threats from the President of the United States. Where is Melania talking about violent rhetoric? Where is Erica Kirk talking about dehumanizing people and violent rhetoric and how it has to end all of this rhetoric? Why don't you talk to the president about it? Someone who has a lot of influence, who also is over the largest military force in the entire world that has been causing just endless death and destruction for years and years for imperialist violence, supporting the Israeli genocidal project as well as other genocidal projects in Sudan, in the Congo, just randomly bombing places wherever they want, like off the coast of Venezuela, in the Caribbean, in the Pacific, Nigeria, just strangling the life out of Cuba, how they have finally ran out of oil, or not finally, again, they've run out of fuel. And it's like, when does this stop? Fascists don't stop because we ask nicely. They don't stop because they are losing public support. Fascists stop because we make them stop. This is why organizing, unionizing, making sure that we actually leverage one of the few things that we have when it comes to this power imbalance, which is our labor, making sure that we are organized enough so that we can actually do this in an efficient and substantial way so they feel the pressure. This is why we'll be continuing to talk about this.
And a halt to fighting in Lebanon. On Sunday, a drone strike sparked a fire at an electrical generator on the perimeter of the UAE's Baraka nuclear power plant, the first and only nuclear power station on the Arabian Peninsula. No group claimed responsibility, but the UAE has faced repeated Iranian drone and missile attacks since the war began in February. Meanwhile, the New York Times reports Israel built 2 covert military outposts in Iraq's western desert in advance of its war against Iran, with preparations for at least one site dating back to late 2024. According to the Wall Street Journal, Baghdad had notified Washington in late March over suspected covert military activity, calling it a violation of Iraqi sovereignty. Israel killed at least 6 people in southern Lebanon, including 3 paramedics Friday, just hours after the U.S. State Department announced Israel and Lebanon had agreed to extend their ceasefire by 45 days, following 2 days of negotiations in Washington. Israel then continued strikes into the weekend, killing at least 5 more people while injuring over a dozen in a series of air attacks on southern and eastern Lebanon Sunday. More than 670 people have been killed by Israeli strikes in Lebanon since the ceasefire took effect in mid-April. And the number killed since early March is rapidly approaching 3,000. More than 1 million people, 1 in 5 Lebanese, have been forced to flee their homes. Israel's assassinated Izzeldin al-Haddad, the head of Hamas's military wing, in a strike on a residential building in Gaza City on Friday. Al-Haddad was killed alongside his wife and their 19-year-old daughter. Hamas condemned what it called Israel's, quote, treacherous and cowardly assassination, unquote. On Sunday, Israeli attacks killed at least 8 Palestinians across the Gaza Strip. 3 victims were community kitchen workers, according to Al Jazeera. Israeli attacks have killed at least 871 Palestinians in Gaza since the so-called ceasefire took effect last year. This is Walaa Baroud, whose brother was killed in an Israeli strike.
Every citizen in the Gaza Strip is at risk of being directly hit by the Israeli occupation at any moment. The occupation makes no distinction between charitable workers, journalists, security personnel, civil defense workers, security forces, emergency responders, or doctors. The Israeli occupation has targeted every segment of the Palestinian people. The Israeli war continues. It has not stopped to this day, and the bloodshed continues and the number of martyrs increase daily.
Israel's cabinets approved plans to build a military compound at the former site of the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestinian refugees in occupied East Jerusalem. Israel bulldozed UNRWA's headquarters in January after seizing the site last year in an act condemned by the United Nations and governments around the world. Meanwhile,
yeah, is the UN going to do shit about it? Are they actually going to stop this genocidal force, this violent, warmongering, evil force of the Israeli government? Like, this is why talking about, like, international law, how it really has no teeth, that it's just like, oh, don't do that. Okay, but how are we going to back it up? What is going to enforce law when people are not obeying it? Which, time and time again, the US and the aircraft carrier of the US that we know as the Israeli state continues to violate international law. This is what happens when empires are not held to account, when nations around the world are afraid to go up against empire, when people in the heart of empire are disorganized and propagandized and ignorant beyond belief because guess what? Our education is shit. I think people all around the world are continually underestimating how uneducated and ignorant Americans are when it comes to history and foreign policy, especially. Like, just last week, what was it? I saw on Hassan's stream that he, like, wasn't believing that so many Americans didn't know that Japan bombed Pearl Harbor because of an oil blockade. Guess what? I didn't know about that until he said that. Like, sad to say. Like, I wish that wasn't the truth. But there was like 88% of his chat who grew up in the US that were like, I didn't know that. Because this is the level of ignorance that they ensure with the populace of like, oh, these things just happen as isolated incidents. It's not as if the American empire hasn't been doing all of this violent action for years and years and years. This nation state that was built off of the blood of people, of indigenous people, especially of chattel slavery and stolen land. Like, what are we talking about?
Israeli authorities have forced dozens of Palestinian families from their homes in East Jerusalem's Al Bustan district to make way for a biblical theme park called the King's Garden. The Guardian reports some Palestinians were forced to demolish their...
A biblical theme park? Excuse me? That sounds like so tacky. Not to mention just deplorable with everything that's going on. And this emphasis on Christianity being like the center of the world, that has a direct tie to Western interests, clearly. Hello, Night and Love. Welcome. What kind of shit is that? Oh, you know. Just classic US empire hegemony that is violent and evil, also being done through the nation state of Israel. Mondays are rough for many reasons, but, you know, catching up on current events is very disheartening. Which is why I try to, like, throw some more lighthearted things in the midst, but especially when, like, we're addressing the seriousness of all of these events, like, knowing what that balance is can be difficult. So, there we go. but still trying to keep that revolutionary optimism. This is why we need a world strike. This is why we need a national strike, because these forces are not stopping unless we make them, which I realize is probably a naive perspective, a very ambitious perspective, but we need to be continuing to talk about it. Anyway, how are you doing? How was your weekend?
Own family homes where multiple generations previously lived. Israeli forces have begun intercepting ships with a Gaza-bound humanitarian aid flotilla off the coast of Cyprus. The global Samud flotilla says Israeli military vessels intercepted the fleet in international waters, actions it condemned as illegal acts of piracy. Organizers of the flotilla said Israeli forces had intercepted 17 boats and that contact had been lost with nearly 24 vessels in the eastern Mediterranean. The flotilla had been attempting to breach Israel's maritime blockade of Gaza to deliver humanitarian aid to Palestinians. This is an activist on board one of the aid ships.
We are being intercepted in broad daylight. The occupation forces have no shame whatsoever. They're doing it in front of the whole world because they know that everything they did in the past has been met with full impunity. This means that this is the moment to mobilize as much as we can, to go into the streets and show that the people of the world are against their criminal acts. This is how far they're willing to go to continue their genocide of the Palestinian people.
More than 50 ships with the global Samud flotilla set sail from the Turkish port city of Marmaris last week. Israeli media reported Israel's Navy will transfer the arrested activists to the Israeli port.
Lost connection. Oh, that's okay. I was just talking about how the U.S. empire and the U.S. aircraft carrier that we know as the nation state of Israel just continually have impunity, just like what they're discussing here, how it is difficult to maintain a sense of optimism without discussing the need to organize, like what this activist is talking about here again, that we need a global strike. We need a national strike, certainly in the US, but in order to stop what is going on, we need to withhold our labor. And that it's not just about stopping genocides, although that should be like reason enough for us to want to do this. But also with global capitalism, with all of these oligarchs who are at the head of the surveillance state and who are bent on creating all of these ethno-states and continuing ethnic cleansing in various areas of the world. They're not going to stop in the areas that they are currently pursuing this. We have national strikes in Belgium. Yeah, in many European countries, you tend to be better at national strikes. It does help to have the populace more like in closer proximity to one another. Today was all teachers not doing their job. Yes! I love to hear that. I did not know about this. Thank you for relating that information. Do you know what they are asking for? Convincing kids to not go to school. I mean, it probably doesn't take much to convince them to not go to school. They're like, okay, twist my arm. I'm going to be looking up some of these details. Belgium has a lot of strikes. Yeah, it seems like Belgium is great at mobilizing strikes, especially these general national strikes, as well as France. That's pretty common. And that's what is necessary to protect people, working class people, especially people in the working class who are experiencing multiple intersections of marginalization.
Of Ashdod.
That's cool. I love to
The
hear
World
that.
Health Organization's declared a global health emergency due to the rapid spread of Ebola virus in the Democratic Republic of Congo and Uganda. Sunday's announcement came a day after the African Union's public health agency said it confirmed Ebola infections in the DRC's northeastern province of Ituri, where 65 deaths and hundreds of illnesses have been reported. Cases have since been confirmed in Uganda's capital, Kampala, where residents fear a repeat of deadly outbreaks in 2022 and last year.
Yeah, this also is not an accident that this is happening when all of these areas of aid, like US aid, have been canceled, especially when it comes to like the monitoring of disease outbreaks. This was a form of imperialist soft power, a way to still have control, but that doesn't mean that like we can't hold the nuance of there being some good where that was happening. These areas of aid, like we always have to look at it as like these CIA operations essentially, but to save more money. Okay, so like they were being asked to work more hours but weren't being compensated for it. Where we have hundreds of politicians paid. Yeah, exactly. Where it's like, why is it that politicians are always getting a steady paycheck? Like, it should be mandated that politicians have to experience the material conditions that their most marginalized constituents experience, because then we would see things change very quickly.
Like the government to, one, quickly spread awareness about Ebola and how it is spread, to break down this information even for the layest of people to understand, but also start to institute measures to avoid the spread of Ebola in Kampala and Uganda as a whole, so that there is a feeling of safeness, of security against this disease of Ebola.
Louisiana's Republican Senator Bill Cassidy, two-term incumbent, lost his primary after President...
Okay, we'll get to more of that national news after we've talked about more of this. Buses striked last week. Again, wow. Have you seen any, like as we're talking about movement, have you seen any movement with politicians? Like, were demands met there? 6-7. General strike in Belgium against government reforms draws tens of thousands to the capital. The country's three main trade unions have called for a nationwide protest against the government's reforms. Between 40,000 and 70,000 people marched through the streets of Brussels on Tuesday. The demonstrators gathered at the call of the country's three main trade unions to denounce the federal government's reforms, which the trade unions consider to be antisocial. Also, a few extra years at work. Yep. Of like not letting people retire. 67 is how old you need to be to retire. Okay. I was like, I was guessing it wasn't some like internet teen thing that's like 6-7 that it like actually was meaningful. Maybe that's where that comes from. And that was like a psyop of like capitalist forces that are like, oh, it's just like a funny number, not talking about labor. Okay, as part of one of the trade unions, were there buses involved with that? Yeah, the rally took place against a backdrop of soaring energy prices caused by the war in the Middle East. Yeah, by the idiotic American empire. Oh, yep, here we go. This national demonstration is part of a trade union campaign led for the past year and a half by workers' representatives against the ruling coalition government led by Prime Minister Bart de Wever, a Flemish nationalist. Oh, I remember you talking about this coalition in your document teaching me about Belgian politics. Public transport across the country was running at a reduced service. Charleroi Airport canceled all flights scheduled for the day. Wow. I mean, that's impressive. Carpenters and all of that. Yeah, from what I was able to see online, like there are so many different types of strikes happening, which is great. There's too many to follow. Next year they want to set it at 1.2. Oh my God. So like more than doubling? That is wild. Okay, so this is talking about the previous one. General strikes took place on the 31st of March. Okay, yeah. So this is transportation specifically, like what you were mentioning. Belgian air, rail, and urban transport. So buses, rail, airports. Okay. The three main union confederations, FGTB, ABVV, CSC, ACB, and CGSLB. I'm going to pretend like I know what all those mean. Called a 24-hour walkout in protest at the government's planned pension overhaul and the continuing squeeze on the household purchasing power. Aviation will feel the first and probably the deepest shockwave. Brussels South Charleroi Airport has preemptively canceled its entire schedule for the day. I mean, that's incredible. Yeah, it's like significant disruption. This is what it takes in order to get the powers that be to even pay attention, because this is what happens when we are so disempowered and when these power structures are not listening to the voice of the people. Students were already struggling there to just get educated. Yeah. It's all right politics. Yeah, these people who are just trying to, like, capitalists and right wing thought that prioritizes money. I mean, that's not to say that there aren't like centrist or even leftist, so called leftist movements and politicians and parties that are not invested in this corporate greed and self enrichment, but how it happens the most on the right. Wow. Reduced timetables. Relocation providers warn that residents' permit collections, municipal registration scheduled for 12th May, will most certainly be postponed. Yeah, and it's like, unfortunately, it can cause like some inconvenience to people, like, and the most inconvenience to working class people a lot of the time. But this is why it's an incentive to actually get involved and be part of the resistance rather than be on the outside looking in. Charleroi Airport is a huge export, second in Belgium for commercial flights. Wow. Okay, that's good to know. Thank you for telling me about this. That's awesome. Yeah, it's like being able to organize in this fashion, also like talking about the grassroots efforts that go on with workplace organizing and the importance of trade unions and workplace unionizing cannot be understated. Largely, or one of the main reasons why it is difficult to come by like any sort of national or general strike that can be considered a true strike in the US is because of all of the anti-union legislation that happens with union busting and corporations always being given more power when it comes to exploiting their workers, and also just like the vast land mass that we find ourselves in, that with everyone spread so far apart and states having wildly different laws from one another sometimes, it is difficult to be like, okay, we're all on the same page. If there's something we can do in Belgium is say, nuh-uh. I love that. Males striked for 1 or 2 weeks a little time ago. That's amazing. I need to look up more of the history of striking in Belgium. We have a lot to learn, which is why, like embarking on this streaming expedition, this project, trying to get more media attention on these efforts that are happening all around the world. It's like, why have we not heard more about this with US media outlets? Because they're all part of this mainstream media corporate corruption. In France, the garbage man strike before the Olympics in Paris. Yeah, I remember that. Pretty shocking how it looked. Yeah, and that's like what is effective. Like I remember even just like a couple years ago, people in public transportation striking in France because they were trying to raise the retirement age. US is big enough to only focus on itself. And also, just like this indoctrination of American exceptionalism is really hard to deconstruct for people. To be like, oh, other things are happening in the world, and it doesn't mean that, like, us focusing just on the US means it's more important than other places and people who exist in the world. That is a huge issue that we have to overcome here. So we associate according to our languages. Yeah, and like as you were describing to me in that document that you shared of like how even within languages there is like this um like how there can be like animosity or like competition building between groups of people that political interests take advantage of. Yeah, in my effort to decolonize my own mind and deconstruct a lot of this American empire propaganda, it's good to be aware of everything that's going on, which is something I want to continue to highlight all of these efforts to organize, especially when it comes to labor in the world. French don't know a lot about Belgium or Switzerland, even though it's right next to it. Yeah, and how there are all of these like political forces that capitalize on that, like literally, where they're like, "Oh, don't learn about what other people are doing." It's like it's not just a phenomenon that's exclusive to the US, of course, but all of these people in the ruling class that are like, "We have an interest in making it so the populace is ignorant so that we can further control the narrative." Thank you for sharing. I need to do more history on the striking in Belgium. I think I'll focus on that on Thursday. Thursdays is when I'm doing more education about community organizing, so that'll be a good fit. They also want to set the age to start working from 16 now to 15. Oh my god. Of course they do. Yeah, like child labor laws. Who? What?
President Trump backed his challenger, Congressmember Julia Letlow. Cassidy is the first GOP senator in nearly a decade to lose renomination. President Trump had vowed revenge against Senator Cassidy after he voted to impeach Trump following the January 6th insurrection. In his concession speech Saturday, Senator Cassidy made an apparent reference to Trump, saying, quote, "Our country is not about one individual."
And when you participate in democracy, sometimes it doesn't turn out the way you want it to. But you don't pout, you don't whine, you don't claim the election was stolen, you don't find a reason why.
President Trump endorsed Congressmember Julia Letlow, who finished first in Saturday's primary with 45% of the vote. Louisiana State Treasurer John Fleming came in second with 28%. Both of them advanced to a runoff in June. President Trump took to Truth Social to celebrate Senator Cassidy's defeat and went after Kentucky's...
Yeah, because he's actually been outspoken against the Trump regime and all of these idiotic fascist policies that are deeply white supremacist, Christian nationalist, bent on ethnic cleansing and empowering oligarchs. 15 civil years. I hope we also use it in English. Yeah, we're seeing as well, like, not only when it comes to labor laws or like making it so that there are limits to exploiting child labor, like that's happening all around the world, but it's not an accident that there are also moves at the same time to maintain like child marriage laws, lower the age of consent. Like this all has to do with exploitation and dehumanization, viewing people as capital, as commodities, rather children as commodities rather than human beings that need to be protected.
Republican Congressman Thomas Massie, who co-authored the bill compelling the Justice Department to release the Epstein files. Trump wrote, quote, Tom Massie of Kentucky, the worst and most unreliable Republican congressmember in the history of our country, is an even bigger insult to our nation than Senator Bill Cassidy of Louisiana, who suffered an unprecedented loss tonight by not even being allowed
That's because they
to run in
dumped
the
tons
Republican
of
primary.
money into
This
the
is the first
campaigns
time
against
such a thing
Bill
has
Cassidy.
ever happened to a sitting U.S. senator. President Trump gloated. New financial disclosure forms released by the U.S. Office of Government Ethics show President Trump made between $220 million and $750 million in trades in the first 3 months of this year, including purchases and sales of securities in companies such as Microsoft, Meta, NVIDIA, Apple, and Goldman Sachs. According
The same people who were behind him during inauguration, the same people that he brought over with his visit to China to strike up all of these deals, people who are invested in the surveillance state, who are deeply invested in the industrial war complex, like, they don't even care that it's out in the open because they're able to get away with it. Just like how that activist was talking about with the IDF, that it's like they don't even care about hiding things anymore because of the level of impunity, lack of accountability. It's like we're so fucked unless we can get organized in a very substantial way. 15 civil years start on the January 1st, the year you'll turn 15. You can be 14 years old and work. Oh my god. So now they're like, age is arbitrary. It's like, it's just another way to dehumanize people. This sameness. It's like that is very reminiscent of The Giver that we read for Banned Book Club. We finished just a little bit ago, where they don't have individual birthdays for people, that they just have like the year that you're a part of. Like, oh, you're part of the like the 10th year. You're part of the 11th year. It's like that is what that is. It's like a lot of these dystopian novels are not actually that dystopian.
to news of the United States. Trump
Very concerning.
bought between $500,000 and $1 million worth of NVIDIA stock a week before the Commerce Department officially approved the sale of some NVIDIA chips to China.
Yeah, he was not a billionaire before this administration. That is a common misconception of like, oh, he's this rich guy. I mean, he's like just wasted so much money and gambled it away with all of these projects that are failed because he's just evil and does not have any interest in having like sustainable long-term income. It's just about the grift. That's always been what he has been doing, all of his family, but it's just like a larger, he is a microcosm of this larger system of impunity and preference for capital, the ruling class, people who are born into money, that they can be as irresponsible with money and that like investors don't even care. While the rest of us, if we want to actually start a business or heaven forbid, like have a livable life, that we have to be subject to all of these various aspects of law, and if we don't, that we're like some of the first to encounter law enforcement. You saying we are fucked while Trump was unproposed. Yeah, exactly. It's because of this fucker that we're fucked. But, you know, it's like I try to have a balance in talking about how more than ever people are waking up to what is going on. It's like I think we already are fucked in so many ways, especially when it comes to the proliferation of AI, these data centers, these like nuclear power plants that are being built as well to power these data centers. It's like so many people are already suffering with what is going on, and so much of it we have yet even to uncover. People are only starting to realize it until they start feeling the negative effects, and like that's too late. So this is why we just need to get organized. And the hard part is that like good organizing that is effective, that isn't dehumanizing, that isn't perpetuating these other systems of exploitation and power imbalance, that it's hard to come by. Like it's hard work. It's hard won, but that is what is necessary. AI is going to pop at some time. I know, exactly, because they're investing all of this bullshit money into it. It's like they aren't interested in gaining a profit from it. What they're wanting to do, what they're banking on it doing, is that it is going to have this mass layoff with everyone in their, or mass layoffs for the workforce, and that they are wanting to then have all of those salaries go into their pockets. It's not about like making money from it. It is about like uh it is about taking all of these salaries away and wages. Studies show that using AI is making developers work slower than they did before. Interesting. I mean, the thing that's like so scary about AI as well is like anything you put in there, it is being used against us because all of these algorithms, like the learning that it's doing, like there's nothing that is secure that is being put in AI. There's no way to have it be secure when it is owned by these like very overtly fascist capitalists, and that you can't always trust what AI is saying is true because it pulls things from the internet. And guess what? The internet is full of disinformation, misinformation, racism, bigotry, discrimination, that it's like all of this goes into AI. So like the way we fight it is by like actually having respect for humans, for the planet, for human labor, human creativity, especially. Which is why, if anyone is interested in joining the Discord, that you helped me to organize Night in the Law, so thank you. Submissions for art, that is always very welcome because we have way more talent than the ruling class does, the capitalist class, because they have to exploit us for a reason. They're deeply untalented. A study showed they expected 24% decrease of time, where they lost 19%. Wow. So, like, it is more work to, like, go back and double check things? Or that it just, I don't even know. What is going into that? Or people are just like lulled into this sense of security that things are going to be much faster, or just like sorting through AI is complicated and takes more time.
The Trump Organization claims the investments are managed exclusively
Yeah, the Discord was
by
a great
third-party
idea.
finance.
It's also helpful because like I'm not an active, or previously I was not a super active Discord user. So it's good to get ideas and guidance from people who are more used to the platform.
Institutions that neither Trump, his family, nor the Trump Organization plays any role in investment decisions. In Washington, D.C., thousands of people gathered on the National Mall Sunday for a taxpayer-funded Christian evangelical service backed by President Trump. The 8-hour lineup featured song, prayer, and speeches by government officials, including House Speaker Mike Johnson, who shared the stage with religious leaders Franklin Graham, Cardinal Timothy Dolan, and others. President Trump appeared in a pre-recorded video.
I heard
was
about
apparently
this.
recorded weeks ago at a separate White House event titled America Reads the Bible. Others appearing by video included Vice President J.D. Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth. The Freedom From Religion Foundation blasted the event as an unprecedented and shocking mix of church and state, adding, quote, "Our Constitution is godless by design. The government has no authority to organize religious revivals, much less use them to promote a Christian nationalist agenda," they said.
Yeah. Exactly. Freedom from religion. That is what freedom of religion originally meant, that all of these Christian nationalists do not want people to believe, with all of this revisionist history that they talk about, where it's like, you do realize that all of these colonizers who left Europe to be like, oh, we don't want to be part of the Catholic Church, largely why there is this very prominent anti-Catholic sentiment that still exists in the US, is because people were like, I don't want to be part of that religion. And they're the same ones that are like, you have to be part of this religion. It's like, okay, you are perpetuating the same problems that you claim to be against. But again, this is what happens with oppressors, that they create the situations that lead to inequality and oppression, and then blame people for being in these situations. Also, they usually didn't double check, and the code it recreated was bulky, repetitive, and had major security issues. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, none of it is secure. That's why, like, I know some people want to use AI of like, oh, it helps speed some things up, but especially when it comes to like organizing or like putting in sensitive information, it's like, that should never be a thing with AI. Like, I don't think AI should be used ever, at all. And it's because all of this is being banked and logged by people who are like the literal descendants of Nazis, like all of these CEOs. That's like, how can we trust them to do anything that is in the benefit of humanity? Because they naturally are creating these ethno-states, supporting ethno-states that are deeply anti-human, invested in war, and trying to have all of these jobs be eliminated so that they can take all of the salaries and wages.
The Supreme Court on Friday turned down an effort by Virginia Democrats to implement a new congressional map, which would have allowed Democrats to gain up to 4 additional seats in the House.
I know. I think
with no dissents.
From what you've said in the past, you're more like pro AI than what I am. I think especially as I've seen like in Utah where I'm located, how, and just like places around the nation, that like just the very existence of them, they're like destroying the planet and like using up all of this energy and water and resources, and also eliminating so many jobs, that I don't think like in and of itself it's a neutral thing. That in order to power it in the first place, it is based off of extraction. We may use AI, but we need to start learning how to use it. Yeah, it's like, I think even more important than that is like, how, like, are there any sort of ways to power it? It's like, yeah, in general, I don't think it's a good idea. It's like we haven't learned anything from all of these like sci-fi movies about AI. I'm clearly not pro AI. I'm a gamer. Yeah. But yeah, it's like, I don't know if there are any way, like there are any aspects of using it that doesn't completely like destroy the environment and like people's livelihoods as well. Just like the existence of it and who is in charge of it cannot be trusted. Made my computer too expensive. There you go. That's one aspect.
Leaves in place a ruling by the Virginia Supreme Court striking down the map. The push to redraw congressional maps began last year when President Trump pressured Republican-led states to come up with new district maps ahead of the midterms. In Alabama, thousands of people joined a rally at the state capitol in Montgomery on Saturday, demanding an end to racist gerrymandering by Republican state legislatures in southern states targeting black voters. The National Day of Action came in response to the Supreme Court's April ruling, which gutted Voting Rights Act protections for majority black districts.
Yeah, this is devastating. They're trying to just bring back Jim Crow laws to disenfranchise so many black constituents, people of color in general, but especially when it comes to black voters. And this is just a continuation of not having any sort of substantial reconstruction after the abolishment of slavery, supposedly. Because we know that just transformed into the for-profit prison complex. So there still is like so much work that needs to be done, and why we need to be talking about what is the word I'm looking for? Reparations. Why we need to be talking about reparations as a moral necessity that is just imperative in order to maintain rights. And I mean, even the rights that like a lot of people were never afforded to begin with, but to make sure that people actually have they have some recourse with everything that's been going on. It's like that has to be first and foremost with people. Like if we're talking about electoralism, people who are being voted into office need to be focused on reparations. AI isn't that bad for climate. They don't make the water toxic, only hotter. I mean, for like if we're talking about climate, especially like in Utah, the place that I'm located, it's not just about climate, but like we're already in a drought where like the Great Salt Lake is drying up. The lake bed is full of arsenic and radioactive toxins that are already being blown around that are making people develop cancer. That it is primarily targeting and hurting people who are marginalized, especially people of color who live near the Great Salt Lake. That even like these small amounts of like heat that I guess they aren't even small, but like what may look on the outset as like increases in temperature that these data centers will create are already like these ecosystems are already collapsing because of unchecked corporate greed, no sort of laws when it comes to regulating corporations and what they can do and their emissions that they put out, that it's like it will destroy like the entire environment of Utah within like 5 to 10 years. And that's like a pretty conservative estimate, where it's like we already are seeing a collapse of these ecosystems, and that like even just the water that is being put out with it having with it being so hot that it's unusable, that it needs to be cooled down in order for it to not just completely destroy life in these ecosystems, and in order for it to be usable, that they're having to build even more power, like these nuclear power plants that they're saying they're not going to take from the grid, but they do anyway, that they're giving off even more heat and that they're taking up even more power. So it's just like this way, this covert way of saying like, oh, we're creating our own power, while not actually footing the bill for it. It's like we the people are with all of our utilities. They don't need to put the water in any kind of toxic stuff, only to cool down some computer. Yeah, but like the energy also, like the heat island, like in Utah that they're talking about that these data centers create, that it takes even more energy and power to cool down around it, like all the computers, but also the water itself. And that is creating a rise in temperature all around and also using up even more energy. So it's not due to data center. Why do you focus that much on the pollution factor when the problem is in energy creation? I think they're the same thing. That like there are a lot of emissions that are being created, but it's not even as much of pollution, even though that is an aspect. Pollution has led us, like, again, talking about this specific situation in Utah, has led us to environmental collapse, especially when it comes to like the wetlands and the Great Salt Lake, that it's drying up, that all of these refineries, especially, that they're causing the temperature to rise, that we are not seeing like as much rainfall or snowfall, that affects like all of life in Utah, including human life. And even like the economy when it comes to like tourism, people coming here to ski, to participate in all of these various activities, that it's like it's making these ecosystems collapse. But also now we are seeing this energy aspect just double down and increase the already very dire situation that we find ourselves in. Lack of water in the Great Salt Lake will cause immense amounts of pollution. Yeah, exactly. When it comes to like all of the dust, like these dust storms that already are happening with so many toxins, that's polluting the air. That there are tons of arsenic. There's a lot of arsenic in the Great Salt Lake, but also like radioactive, cancer-causing chemicals, that like already we are seeing many people who do not smoke cigarettes or tobacco at all, that they are experiencing a lot of the same health effects that people who smoke like 1 to 2 or like 2 to 3 cigarettes a day, who live around the Great Salt Lake. That's just like how poor the air quality is. Yeah, and then also like not to mention all of the cars and how we have limited public transportation, that all of this fuel that is being given off, all of like the emissions from refineries, that's only increasing. There are no limitations set on that. That is also just being, like let into the air that we're breathing and also settling in the Great Salt Lake. And then as it dries up, even more of that shit is being kicked up.
Saturday's protest began in Selma with a march across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, named after the former Confederate officer and Ku Klux Klan leader, which was the site of the historic 1965 Voting Rights March that became known as Bloody Sunday.
How are you doing?
This is Lakita Smith, an organizer who traveled from New Orleans to join Saturday's march.
Selma has a special place in my heart. I'm a Southern girl, and I believe that suppression of voting rights is what's happening across the South in the United States. It requires all hands on deck.
We'll be joined by Bishop William Barber later in the broadcast. And 5 unions representing more than 3,500 workers for the Long Island Railroad have staged their first strike in more than 30 years, bringing all train service to a halt.
Yes.
On North America's largest commuter railroad. The strike follows 3 years of failed contract negotiations. Union leaders say wages haven't kept up with the cost of living and that workers haven't received raises since 2022. More than 250,000 daily riders rely on the service to commute between New York City and Long Island. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Thanks for watching Democracy Now! On YouTube. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to make sure you never miss a video.
Thanks, Amy Goodman. As a European, I'll say, look at all the shit you are eating. It's normal. People are in good health. Well, it's like all of the above. Because our food, these like very few corporations that control all of these different food companies, that they are poisoning us in so many ways, like all of this filler that they put in food, all of these preservatives, because they don't actually believe in fresh food. They're trying to just maximize capital and have it last as long as possible. That it's like we're being killed in a lot of ways. And that like pollution is not something that is even really allowed to be reported on when it comes to state health departments. Like as someone who worked for the state health department and like in the tobacco prevention and control program, we were not allowed to talk about environmental pollution or like the Great Salt Lake drying up and how that affects lung health. That reports would not be approved because of this. So like a lot of the time, like people just don't even know how much is going on because that is actively being suppressed by governments too. On the way to an install. It's the only time the person can be home is 5. Oh yeah, so you're having to work late. 3 hours? Damn. I mean, I'm glad you're at least getting compensated for overtime. I mean, we have pretty much the same food companies. Yeah, a lot of them are global, but especially, yeah, when it comes to the legislation, what they're allowed to do or what they aren't allowed to do. And that is a direct result because of these corporations basically having like unlimited access and sway over our politicians. So it's like, and the same people who are part of like big oil companies, um, like all of these areas that like are polluting the earth but also just extracting, because that can't be separated from one another, is like the extraction and exploitation and pollution. It's like all of it is invested and goes towards this capitalist project that really is killing us all. I mean, it has been happening for a very long time, but it is happening at a very alarming rate, especially within the past decade, but particularly within the past few years, especially with this current fascist regime that we find ourselves in, where they have completely just co-opted the federal government. They have fired all of these scientists that and people who would normally be regulating and monitoring what is happening with the environment and with food and with the people's health, that that they have gotten rid of all of these regulations. And like especially when it comes to coal, how they're like, yeah, there are no restrictions basically for burning coal or using coal. That it's like this is making it so corporations have full access to be as exploitative and extractive as possible. One step closer to Wally. Yeah, honestly. In fact, your country is rich, is big corporations threatening USA to leave. Well, it's that, but it's all part of like the same system. So like legislation, like as you mentioned, that has been done over years has allowed them to become as rich as what they are. And it's like the country is rich because of like the accumulation and hoarding of wealth. It's not like we're talking about the country as a whole. Like, who is being enriched? It certainly is not the working class. It is the capitalists that are at the top. So, like, talking about like GDP and like the stock market, it's really only talking about the 1%, the capitalist class, the ruling class, where we have legislators that are also allowed to like trade stocks. So, like, it's all part of this incestuous problem where like everyone at the top is being enriched, where like the donors are contributing to campaigns, and then when legislators are in place, that they are acting in ways that benefit their donors and corporate interests that they also are making money off of with their investments in stock. So it just continues the cycle. We don't have legislation on using coal, only importing, selling, extracting coal. Interesting. Yeah, we really have so many aspects of life. Like living in the US, you're basically exploited in every aspect of your life. It's like you can't drink water, you can't like exist where you're at, like the place where you live, like with landlords and mortgages and banks and like all of the extraction that is happening from human labor and the earth. And now we see like our very minds with AI. It is very concerning. Once my kids are grown, for real, consider moving out of the country. I know, exactly. I have been trying to like apply for jobs that are outside of the US for this reason. And guess what? Especially with all of the bullshit happening with wars that are immoral and illegal and having all of this death and destruction for no reason besides enriching the warmongering class, that Americans are not very popular. And like, duh, of course. But it's like some of the last people they're wanting to hire are like, oh, you're an American? You're like helping to disrupt or part of the problem, like the world market. It's like, yeah, this is the state that we're in. We deserve to be hated in many ways, like the US empire, but yeah, individual Americans as well. We are seeing this with like not wanting to be hired in other parts of the world. The thing I saw when I visited my family in the US, who shocked me the most, is smart water. Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, this should just be water. But again, everything is just commodified. My sister says she wants to move to Uruguay. Yeah. Yeah, it's looking very bleak, which is why it's like, unless we, the people, stop them, it doesn't look like things are really going to improve. And, like, admittedly, this is a very long project to be working towards, especially in the US when it comes to, like, a genuine national strike. It's water with some salt. Exactly. Everything is commodified. Everything is commodified. Also, like, I'm going to be talking about this on Friday for Culture Corner, but like the rise in Ozempic of like, we already have like so many aspects of like beauty, which is something that can be bought in the US. And how it is centralized around like white European beauty standards, that with Ozempic, we see a commodification of starvation that is very alarming. That, like, in very real circumstances in the world, that, like, the US is funding a genocide against Palestinians, and, like, these other places of the world where genocide is happening and starvation is happening because, like, these are man-made situations. It's not because, like, this is just naturally happening. It's like we have celebrities who are looking skeletal, where it is a sign of class and wealth to look like you are starving but have access to food. Like, that is really insane to me. A fourth of the country loves what is happening. Yeah, it's really disappointing. And unfortunately, a lot of the people who are part of that group also have access to capital, but not all of them, which is why it's important to continue to talk about like the areas that we actually have crossover. And I mean, this doesn't mean like people should be working with people who are dehumanizing them, but this is where I talk about like messengers matter. Like certain messengers who are like, oh, this is someone who is extremely racist and they may not like be able to be moved on like certain issues, but like being able to have like class solidarity is important. And so like finding where there is common ground, which I'm not one to be like, we need to be working across the aisle, or Like, we need to have standards. So, like, if people are being, like, very discriminatory, like, not being willing to organize with them, but also exploiting these areas that, like, we have more in common than the capitalist class. So, like, making it so that, like, people can start to deconstruct a lot of this white supremacy and American exceptionalism, that there are certain messengers who will be listened to as opposed to, like, other people, especially when it comes to, like, intersections of marginalization, that they won't be as likely to be listened to. Problem is that the US is the first country that could be deeply controlled. And the country who's most capable and in line mentally with stopping that is Russia. I haven't thought of that. We could very easily do what we were scared that Russia would do during the USSR occupation. Yeah, it's like, this is what, I mean, like, the US already is doing so much shit. Like, the greatest threat to the world right now is the US empire, honestly. Canada is too close and Europe is too weak. It's like most of these like Western nations are complicit and part of the capitalist web, where they are also benefiting from what is going on, and also they have been systematically disempowered in some ways by the US to make it so that they are ever more reliant on American capitalism. But yeah, they're also, like, invested in these sectors that the US controls, or also they're invested in these larger projects that the US is invested in. More like what USSR was scared of with capitalism. Yes, exactly. Someone needs to wage war on us and win. I know. And it's like, this is, like, unfortunately, with that happening, like, so many, like, human lives and working class lives, people who are marginalized and oppressed, are on the front lines of these wars, that we are just cannon fodder and labor for them to exploit. It is depressing and concerning, but I mean, we're already seeing with Iran where they are winning. Like, they have the upper hand with what's going on because the current regime has no interest in diplomatic resolution of this conflict that they started, because they have so many people that are profiting from what is going on. These oil executives that are making tons of money with the rise in price of these of barrels of oil, that they won't care that the price is going up for a very long time until they've already made tons and tons of money off of it. And we see how, like, so many of these politicians are invested in surveillance, in weapons manufacturers, in AI, in all of these, like, oil companies as well. It's like, the corruption is just so permeable. That's like, you can see how people will vote with their like, political leanings and on legislation just by looking at their donors. Okay, so this is from TRT World. It's a Turkish outlet, and I wanted to highlight this. This is not being covered as much in mainstream media spaces. Rising fuel prices spark protests in Nairobi.
Fury over another fuel price hike in Nairobi, as protesters poured onto the streets, setting bonfires, barricading roads, and at times clashing with police who fired tear gas in response. Thousands of commuters were left stranded, blocked, or just unable to get to work. Public transport shut down, forcing many to turn back or stay at home.
Most of the people, they're depending on fuel, they're depending on diesel, and we can't do what we are doing today when the price of fuel is above. That's what people are in the road striking.
Kenya's Interior Ministry says a number of people have already lost their lives as a result of the protests. Like many African countries, Kenya relies heavily on imports from the Gulf. Nearly 70% of its fuel comes from there. And with the Strait of Hormuz effectively closed,
well, thanks for being
like
here,
many
even
others,
with
is feeling
the limited amount of
Last
sleep
week
that you're
saw
getting.
Prices hit record highs, with the cost of diesel shooting up
Yeah,
more
have a
than
good rest of your night.
23% and petrol up 8%, on top of previous increases. Rising energy prices are driving up the cost of food and other household items too.
Life is becoming so unbearable, so please,
When
Mr.
your
Ruto,
exams
wherever
are
you
done.
are,
Yeah,
you
good
can
luck with
listen to
those.
us Kenyans. We are just
Daddy,
requesting, please,
get some
lower
sleep.
those fuel prices.
We're asking this question.
You'll
How
do
come the
great.
fuel in Kenya is more expensive more than Uganda and Ethiopia and Tanzania? Those fuels, those prices, they are not much.
The government says the protests are uncalled for, that it bears no response.
This is what the governments all around the world say. They're like, these protests are uncalled for. Yeah, maybe I wonder why people are protesting. Have you ever considered looking at what created these conditions that people are protesting? Oh, look, it's imperialist warmongering and capitalist extraction.
Responsibility for the ongoing war, and that its budget is also under strain, while local police have accused some of hijacking the protests.
Well, we'll use any necessary force as provided in the law to deal with any unlawful assembly and restore order. It was not a protest.
I'm concerned by the mustache he has. Like, don't trust cops ever. That's my advice. Their bitch asses uncalled for. Exactly. Like, maybe these oppressive conditions that people are experiencing, how these world powers are refusing to stand up to the US empire, that this has led to this situation.
It was riot and with intention to loot.
But as normally bustling streets fell quiet, with events cancelled and schools closed, protesters say silence is the only way to make those in power listen. Victoria Innes, TRT World.
Yep. I saw this, Jamie Raskin actually being on Democracy Now! Interesting he was willing to be on that independent news outlet. He is not as common of a representative on there. Okay, so continuing along, there's so much happening on the world stage, but I did see this that I wanted to play from More Perfect Union, where AOC actually went to a town that is extremely right-wing, and seeing the effects that the locals are experiencing with these data centers. And this is just a little taste of what will be coming to Utah that already is happening.
Morris a year ago. They live 400 yards. I first met Beverly and Jeff Morris a year ago. They live 400 yards from Meta's 2.5 million square foot data center campus in Morgan County, Georgia, where Trump got over 70% of the vote. Now I'm back, this time with Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, to find out if one of the most progressive Democrats in the country can connect with the people being left behind by the data center boom.
Our water situation is worse. The water that we're getting into the house is worse. And we're all on wells, so when that's affected...
You'll see it on the map
Yeah.
inside. There's just this large area that is the recharge, sort of where the water is under the ground.
The Morrises and their neighbors haven't had clean water from their wells since Meta construction began.
We've seen this playbook before from big companies. This is pretty night and day. You know, the only thing that changed was that spot opening up across the street, right? Nothing else.
Oh, yeah.
When you try to talk to these big tech companies behind these things, the Zuckerbergs and the Jeff Bezos, Amazon, do you think that they have any empathy for what's happening?
Well, one of the reasons why I certainly wanted to come out here is because when you're stuck in Washington and these issues come up, you get a bunch of lobbyists that come down and they tell you that it's all fake. You know, they tell you that the water issues are actually...
I saw a comment on here because I've already seen this video. People are like, lobbyists are supposed to be like representatives. They're actually supposed to represent people. Like the well-being and interests of people. Oh, look. Utah with a water crisis refuses to listen to the citizens that did not want the data center and was overruled by the corrupt politicians. Yep. So people all around are paying attention to this. Yeah, we don't need any. Yeah, this is the comment that I saw earlier. The people they elected to Congress are supposed to lobby for them. Exactly. Hello, Linton. Welcome. How are you doing? How was your weekend? We're currently, of course, talking about aggravating current events, but what else is there?
not that serious, and they say, you know, all this stuff is kind of like an urban legend, and it's really not that bad. Obviously, you guys don't have a lobbyist in Washington. No.
Seeing what you saw this weekend, does it rise to the level of a congressional inquiry?
Absolutely. You're looking at a water recharge area connected to an aquifer that can affect and is connected to the water supply of an entire state. Times every
Doing good.
state.
Glad to hear it. Yeah, and as Night Law was bringing up earlier, it's like, what do we consider pollution? Because like I think we tend to think of it as just like dirty air that is, you know, that people are breathing in, but also like having dirty water, like that is a form of pollution. Like not having the capacity for clean water. I did see a pretty decent candidate in Utah on Hassan's stream. Or is this Nate Bluen? He has some, he doesn't have the best track record, especially when it comes to people who are displaced, so like laws around housing, but I do think he is definitely more progressive than many options. He did have some posts that came out of like him minimizing like sexual harassment that women were experiencing on campuses, but again, like that was like from the past, so like we'll see what his track record shows since then. I guess he did have a post that was like, he said the worst part about living in Utah were Mormons. And like, as someone who grew up Mormon, I would have to agree, because I think that's true for me, at least. I was not offended by that at all.
Data center.
But I mean, it's, yeah, I think they brought up a good point on this stream, because I did see that interview, at least on YouTube, where they were talking about how like, okay, so if we want accountability from people, what does that look like? Like we actually have to have an idea of what we mean when it comes to accountability, and that there need to be like systems in place that actually hold people accountable too. I assumed he had some skeletons. That's why he only got a pretty fair. I appreciate the even-handedness that you're going into with that. But yeah, it's like we do have people who are progressive in Utah. Just we have this super majority, and it's something that I was really glad that they talked about on or in that interview, is how it has been a training ground or like a sandbox essentially for a lot of very right-wing policies and politicians to be trying things out, that corporations often like come up to Utah politicians and they're like, hey, can we try this? That Utah flies under the radar a lot of the time when it comes to unchecked corporate greed or like trying out these very dehumanizing policies, especially when it comes to queer people, when it comes to disenfranchising people of color. So like it just because Utah's like, oh, it's just full of like white people who are Mormon and they seem kind of nice. That's like, okay, Mormonism is deeply white supremacist. So just keeping that in mind. Most people in electoral politics in general only get a pretty decent, yeah, it is true. Especially in Utah. But yeah, it's like we are constantly having to make compromises with electoralism, which is why like there are so many issues with electoralism, but we do also have to acknowledge that electoral politics do in fact affect our material conditions, as we have seen with these fascists who are just stepping on the gas right now. That like it is an aspect of our lives that we must confront, but also why we can't just stop at electoral politics, that there is this necessity for community organizing as well. It all contributes. But yes, that is a very accurate take, I think.
Is in. That absolutely merits and rises to the level of national congressional investigation.
This is the first time I've heard anyone come forward and say, we need to stop this.
What was it like hearing from AOC and meeting her?
It's not what I expected, really. It was a good surprise. I mean, I think it went real well. I feel like she cares about our situation.
There's just a lot of controversy around everything political, you know.
Imagine actually getting someone, I mean, like AOC has like her own, like as we're talking about skeletons, like she does have one of the more like most progressive track records in all of Congress. Like we have to admit that, especially when it comes to foreign policy, that people often don't give her enough credit for that, or they can be harsher with her than with Bernie. That like she has a much better track record when it comes to foreign policy than Bernie does. And that is a direct result of racism and misogyny, sexism, how these intersections of marginalization make it so people are like more willing to demonize her than Bernie as well. Also like this perspective of like seniority, that means proximity to like wisdom, and it's like that's not always the case. Like we have plenty of young people that are extremely intelligent, that are leading the charge, who are revolutionary, and like that has been the case. We need to get rid of this gerontocracy. But it is interesting how it's like, when you actually meet someone who is an elected official who seems to be a little more aware of the circumstances that people are going through, that they are not actively taking PAC money or money from lobbyists, that like they tend to care more about the average person. Imagine that.
If there's a chance that anything can be done, I feel like she is going to be the one to do it. But working together across party lines, we need her.
I was shocked by that, honestly, by them saying that. That it's like, oh, you actually have someone who's willing to listen to you, who isn't just like, stop being a baby. Or like in Utah, how we saw those commissioners being like, grow the hell up. That's like, okay, so we're being childish for asking for human dignity. This is constantly the pattern with the powers that be. They think we're being just like insolent little brats. And it's like, yeah, we can be bratty, but not in the way that you think. We're bratty in the way of like wanting to push back against these constraints that are unethical. Okay, so as we're continuing to talk about national news, The Root, they have some really great content that they put out, especially as we are getting more on-the-ground coverage from them with voting rights. So I saw this this interview that they had with the Tennessee rep, Justin Pearson, who has been a consistent voice of clarity and raising the alarm when it comes to voting rights. That, like, there was a little bit ago, this meeting, was it just last week or a couple weeks ago, where he was not allowed to go into a meeting or a vote for the state of Tennessee. That is Jim Crow. That is just overtly Jim Crow. People who are not allowed to actually vote for their constituents, that they are elected by their constituents, voting for their constituents, that's Jim Crow. They had a far-right march over the weekend here. Oh, I saw that. And, like, this is why we have to continually talk about how global all of these issues are, of, like, these white supremacists and Nazis that are, like, feeling empowered in the US when they see people gaining traction in the heart of empire, just other parts of the world, like with the fascist policies of the Israeli government, that it's like, other people are like, well, they're allowed to do this, I can do it too. It's like, that's not like, that's not what the world needs, but this is what happens when people are met with no pushback. And there are all of these systems that are already disempowering people who are more human-centered and leftist, that they feel even more emboldened. They only organized it to surround the Nakba Day March. Yeah. Organized hand in hand with Met Police Commissioner Mark Rowley for the express purpose of disrupting. See, this is why we should never trust cops. Like, ACAB everywhere, all over the world. We should not trust cops. They are largely, like, even if, like, the Ku Klux Klan is an American organization, terrorist organization, started in the US, but, like, the concept of what they stand for is not exclusive to the US. White supremacy, violent hierarchy that is racialized and very patriarchal, very based out of colonial ideas of dominance, and how, like, people like Klansmen, like cops, they are drawn to these positions of wanting to have power over other people. And that this is a common sentiment all around the world, that we have, if not in name, in every other aspect, Klansmen in police forces and in the government. There is a reason why Trump recently, like, as we were seeing with that other, like, Jamie Raskin recommended video, that with this IRS lawsuit that Trump is, like, pulling back on, or they're getting a settlement from, that it's creating a slush fund for white supremacist groups, that they are defunding the Southern Poverty Law Center that investigates white supremacist hate groups. Like, I wonder why you're willing to call Antifa, that is not an organized group whatsoever, that is just like a sentiment of being against fascism, that they are being called a terrorist group or people who actually hold anti-fascist sentiments, and not the Ku Klux Klan. Maybe it's because we have Klansmen in these positions of power. Maybe it's because the President of the United States had a dad who was arrested at a Klan rally in New York City. And the police also deployed multiple different Israeli AI software to survey the crowd. Yeah, it's like, this is why we, like, just continuing to talk about the interconnectedness of it all, of AI being a surveillance tool, surveillance state to make it so that we are constantly under their thumb and not resisting. And that when people are resisting, that they are stopped before they can get more momentum. Like, AI is evil in my mind, especially when it comes to it being in the hands of these Nazis.
with one of the leaders of the movement, Justin Pearson. Representative Justin Pearson, how you doing today?
I am doing better being here in this community.
You know, I'm not even going to ask you why are you here today like I have with everybody else, because we know why you're here. But the same thing that is happening here in Alabama with Republicans wanting to redistrict our congressional maps is also happening in Tennessee. I want to know from you, what are the things that you're expecting for the community to do between now and the election in November? And also, what are you expecting to happen at a government level as well?
So we got two parts of this. The first part is, as these maps are being designed, we need people to show up to the state houses, show up and speak in committees if you are able. But even if you can't speak in committees, go sit in the galleries, bring your signs, have a show of presence that you are against this. I've met so many people who had never been to the Capitol before, who showed up in this fight, who said democracy is worth it, trying to fight Jim Crow 2.0 is worth it. The Neo-Confederacy is our
Yep,
enemy,
calling
and I'm
it
going to
what it
stand up
is.
against it.
Jim
Little
Crow
I met a lady
2.0.
who had lived in Nashville 37 years, had never been to the Capitol. Go to your state capitals and fight against these racist redistricting maps. The second thing is, we have to make sure that we are organizing, mobilizing, activating our power. Are you and everyone in your family who's able to vote, voting and registered? I know we talk a lot about community-wide, go host, this and go host that. No. In your own.
Yeah, as we're talking about electoral politics of like how much does it matter, how much does it not, we can see that the powers that be are afraid of us voting. And that in and of itself should be a sign that there is more power there than sometimes what they want us to believe, especially as we're having more progressive people actually be voted into power. It doesn't mean it's a solution for everything, the material conditions that we are experiencing, like Zoran Mamdani being elected into New York office, like why so many people were fighting that. Corporate interests, these oligarchs, because they were afraid of the people seeing what can be done when people actually have the political will and determination to change material circumstances. It's like at the same time, it doesn't minimize the efforts that community organizers have been doing, that there are people who are very consistently talking about the increased violence from police, from NYPD, from ICE, that as Zoran is like technically the leader of all of these cops, like the top cop as the mayor, that it's like they are holding people to account in ways that like he is unable to in these positions of power, because guess what? This is how we see these hierarchies and positions of power are built off of the oppression of people, that it is necessary to have people who are more sympathetic to the will of the people and their circumstances, but also to have these outside forces that are willing to hold people to account. Core site facial recognition, brief cam for tracking people's movement, nice systems for investigations, and Celebrate for searching your phone. The data from which they share with the company, all of these companies are filled with former Unit 8200 soldiers and former Israeli intelligence. Yeah, and it's all connected. And it's like, oh, we read about this in the Epstein files, with Epstein first bringing this up to what's his name? The former Israeli Prime Minister, Ehud Barak, and being like, have you heard of Palantir? Have you heard of Peter Thiel? Literal descendant of Nazis who was an apartheid supporter from South Africa. Like how all of this incestuous global fascism that is late stage capitalism is connected, because very few people hold most of the wealth and power in the world. And that is what is so scary. I also heard what happened in the UK over the weekend or sometime last week, where they're talking about a digital ID, that like you need to have some sort of ID to even access the internet. Like, do you have any other information on that too? They're rolling out core sight and body cams in Edmonton. Yeah, I mean, I didn't know about that. That's good to know. Thank you for telling me. But again, this is why, like, people saying, like, oh, cops just need to have body cams. ICE, they just need to have body cams. No, that's another form of surveillance. And a lot of the time, they don't even turn over the body cam footage. Like, we've seen this over and over again, that when people are calling for police to turn over footage when there are situations of police brutality, that they're just like, oh, we can't find it. We don't need to. And then they also have judges and people in the judicial system who are complicit, who are also Klansmen, who are also cops. That it's like, this is why, like, electoralism doesn't save us. It is a factor that we can't ignore, but we also have to constantly be putting up pressure and holding the powers that be to account. I imagine most police forces, I've just seen the UK and Canada reported. Yeah, it's really scary. We are living in a surveillance state. It's like, I don't even think George Orwell, the author of 1984, completely understood how accurate he was. But I mean, like what good artists and what good art does is understand human nature and society and power structures, that it is evergreen. It just is a continual commentary on these power imbalances. Here we go.
Would you consider taking similar action against the march that's planned for the same day as the pro-Palestinian march, May the 16th, the rally being organised by Stephen Yaxley Lennon, Tommy Robinson, a convicted far-right activist? Would you consider banning that?
Well, is he creating a climate of intimidation and violence?
It's not just Britain that's being invaded. It's
Yeah.
not just Britain that's being raped. Every single Western nation faces the same problem.
The hysteria of declining white birth rates in Western civilization, immigrants ruining Western civilization. It's just colonizer behavior. Colonization has never stopped. Also, the fact that, like, there are some people that don't understand that so many flags represent this kind of colonization and oppression and just genocidal history, that it's like, yeah, there are reasons why, like, the American flag, why the Union Jack are looked at with fear and hatred, because they represent death. They are just saturated in the blood of so many people. Tommy Robinson is genuinely an Israeli psyop. Yeah. It's like, and so many people are. But also how it's like part of this larger way to keep American US hegemony and say it's like Western dominance, that like the UK also is subservient to this US empire, and that one of the ways that like there is this propaganda in making these Western nations be compliant with the US empire is by being like, oh, we're all under attack. White people are all under attack. It's like, no, you're all being oppressed by this white supremacist imperialist system. And you have these delusions of grandeur that you're like, oh, we can be back to our empire, the glory of our empire. That it's like, this is how you see people are so easily brainwashed when they're giving into these idiotic ideas of human hierarchy. The people who he established the company for his English Defense League were former IDF. Yeah, not surprising. It just like the rot just goes on and on. And it was originally an offshoot of the JDL. Yep. See, like, not surprising. But this is why it's good to even be talking about this shit, to expose these people so that it becomes more common knowledge.
Orchestrated, organised invasion and replacement of European citizens.
Invasion and replacement. Fascists now are not even afraid of using words like that, where they're like, oh, we're being replaced, and if you say we're talking about the great replacement theory, then I'm going to say, like, how could you say that? While they're actually using words like replaced, or like Western corrosion, or like our quality of life, of like Western values. Oh, you mean just like colonization? You mean genocide? Your value of like indiscriminate death?
Is happening.
We are witnessing the rape, replacement, and murder of our people. I am here today to tell you, no more. This today.
Of course, they get people who are blonde, blue-eyed. He says it plainly, too. He once said if there was a world war, he'd be on the front lines fighting for Israel. Oh my god. Like, for these people who are, like, bent on that, it's like, okay, then join. Join. How about you go to Iran? Like, people in the US, especially people who are these warmongers who, like, just everyday citizens, especially when it comes to these older generations, that they don't care that there might even be a draft, that it's, like, their own kin that will be killed. It's because they have no concept of what war is, that they have not been on the front lines, that they have not experienced this kind of devastation on their own soil that has allowed people to become endlessly bloodthirsty. Like, as we were seeing with Israel as well, that they've been so protected that they have this endless desire for blood and expansion. It's like, it's so ugly to be fascist. It's so ugly to be white supremacist. Like, that's just...
Today is not the time for compromise. Today is not
They're
the
just like
time
aren't even
to
words.
just keep calm and carry on. Today is the time to get angry, demand change, and fight back.
Whether you choose violence or not.
Is she even English? Oh, of course, this shithead.
Violence is coming to you. You either fight back or you die.
Some people
Oh
might
my God.
feel, and some people did feel at that last.
People who are interested in creating white supremacist ethno-states. They're the ones who own all of this AI. I think the blonde woman was Dutch. Yeah, another place that is famous for its colonization and death and destruction.
Big march called Unite the Kingdom. But some people did look at that march and feel intimidated.
Right.
Some people did look at that and think, I don't want to see that. There were
Who did?
concerns.
This is exactly what I'm talking about. You haven't been able to say who that was targeted against.
Islam.
And then, of course, we get the tokenization of this black woman who is being put in this position when she herself is also hurt by these policies, whether she wants to admit it or not. But this is why when we talk about identity politics or like representation, what kind of representation are we talking about? People who are buying into the system, who are corrupted by the system, who are also enriching themselves. It doesn't mean that they will ever get acceptance, that they will ever be looked at as one of the in crowd, but why we have to keep talking about the nefarious nature of tokenization.
Is the most dangerous thing for our society ever. Islam is our real enemy. We have
Kemi
to get rid
Badenoch is
of Islam.
such a ghoul.
Mass immigration and
Ew.
multiculturalism
With this Muppet head. He looks like a Muppet and not in a good way.
are the Trojan horse
Perk.
of Islam.
It's either now or never. Because if these rapist Muslims take over, they will not only rape your women, they will behead your sons. So we either fight now.
Also, that kind of language of saying rapists, they're going to behead people, this otherizing, this constantly trotting out these age-old projections of what it means to like be a genocidal colonizer, of being like, oh, well, we can do as much raping as we want, but if anyone happens to, it's like, it's not logical. Discrimination and like white supremacy is not logical. That's why it's like so idiotic and doesn't make any sense. you. I'm gonna go grab something real quick. My partner got me some food. The UK has had a real habit of having South Asian women as Home Secretary to enact their brutal immigration reforms. Yep, exactly. See, tokenizing people and being like, well, if they're part of this, like, how can that be bad? Because that has always been the case, bitch, of people who are part of the system who benefit. Also, like, not acknowledging, like, as someone who is Indian and, like, my family coming from the Brahmin caste that, like, is inherently this, like, Brahminization of Hindutva and a continuation of white supremacist colonization to just emphasize the caste system, like not acknowledging where like people benefit historically from these systems of like having come from this system of like where people have been able to benefit from that like I myself and my family have benefited from, like you have to acknowledge what that even means and that like we have to call out when this tokenization happens and how there are these people who are just continuing this caste system that when they're like, how can they possibly be thinking this? They're Indian, or like why people are confused by all of these like Indian or Desi tokens in American politics, or like what you're saying in UK politics. It's caste. It's caste. And there are some societies that are just like, oh yeah, that's what it is. Because in India, they're like, yeah, we're proud of the caste system. People who are benefiting from caste. Shabana Mahmood, Swela Braverman, Preeti Patel. Yep. I mean, especially a name like Patel. Patel is very Brahmin. So, like, these very incestuous circles, like, quite literally, of, like, maintaining, like, purity of blood within Brahmin families. Like, that's fascist. That's fascist. So, like, people are used to these systems of imbalanced power and wanting to benefit from it. And it's so cowardly and disgusting to be like, oh, I want to have buy-in to this other system of inequality, rather than recognizing that, like, people who look like you, who will be considered less than human, are experiencing just abominable conditions that you are perpetuating, that it's like just because you are buying into the system now doesn't mean you're not going to be thrown away at any second and also treated in the same manner.
Or we die.
There is something specific that is happening at these marches that is different.
Dear children, dear little ones, we've seen your suffering. We've seen your terrified faces at the...
Yeah, as we're going, cut to this protest that actually is talking about human dignity and how the complete projection happening of like, well, they're actually like terrorists, when in reality, the terrorists, they're on the side of the terrorists and are not willing to engage in that kind of discourse because like who would even think about logic when it comes to discrimination
Sound of Israeli bombs hurtling towards
and genocide.
We've seen you crying in despair at the killing of your parents and family. And yes, we've seen your bodies pulled out from below the rubble of your bombed out homes. But we want you to know in this message, this letter, you are not alone. We are your family now. We are trying to protect you from this cruelty.
Yeah, the difference in language. We are family. We see your suffering. We want to protect you. We want to protect each other, as opposed to like, these people are raping women and beheading people. It's like, I wonder who is espousing violent rhetoric.
We are trying to halt the crimes being committed against you. So we hold you in our hearts. And we promise you, we will not give up until we have secured you peace.
You're saying that all the people on there are conducting hate?
That sign language translator it's like so powerful. Just the emotion as well.
I think what you see, if you see those marches.
Speak about the numbers of civilians killed, we forget that they were someone's mother, someone's child, someone's baby, someone's best friend. They, like us, once made people laugh. They were important, special and loved. The survivors, many of them had missing limbs, and the lucky ones live, starving, playing in rubble, traumatized and living in fear. This is no world I want to be part of. This is no structure or system I can agree with. When human life is so devalued and so lost in greed and delusion, it is only on these marches I feel optimistic about humanity, because here there is heart, there is soul.
It is not okay.
Yeah. When engaging with like-minded people, or people where you actually like have a common cause in principles and valuing human life, that you're like, wow, there actually are good people left in the world. And then you come to realize how most of the world actually is against all of the genocide that is happening, the unconscionable war that is happening in the world, this colonial extraction and dominance, that it's like, it just makes us realize that these people who are in power have to stay in power through these imbalanced means because they don't have public support, and that they double down on their cruelty as they are losing power and even more public support, because they can't keep it up with like genuine principle, with genuine like the heart, that people are not sold on it, because we realize the interconnectedness of our exploitation and the capitalist imperialist violence that is just permeable throughout the globe.
Truly, they're not just peaceful protests, they are truly hate marches.
Week after week, month after month, the people here have marched for peace, for decency, for fairness.
Meanwhile, like I really like the juxtaposition that they have here. That's really powerful, where they're showing the literal hate marches and that rhetoric that is overtly fascist in dehumanizing people and calling people rapists, and using all of these like age-old stereotypes, or not even stereotypes, these like age-old myths of otherizing people when it comes to justifying colonization.
For justice and for international law.
Would you be happy with, say, Tommy Robinson's marches, which included Elon Musk calling for the overthrow of our government?
If we don't take action, they won't be able to mind their own business because other people are going to come and maraud them. There's genuine risk.
Yeah, these people who are just so dead inside. Just the shark eyes. Except I think sharks actually have more, they actually value human life more than these shitheads. That they are like not interested in like killing people in the way that these people are.
Of rape and murder and the destruction of the country and dissolution
Meanwhile, like, what are you doing in your free time, bitch?
of the entire way
What
of
are you
life.
funding?
If this continues, that violence is going to come to you. You will have no choice.
You're happy for that to go ahead?
I don't believe that Tommy Robinson here is talking about wanting to get rid of Israel and eradicate the Jewish people.
No, but he has no.
That is a completely different thing.
But at multiple
That's
demonstrations.
not what people... The Zionist and like white supremacist, just like fascist playbook of saying like, oh, they want to get rid of everyone like this. It's like we see that in like Indian nationalism, Hindu nationalism as well. Like, they want to get rid of all of us. That's like, no one is saying that. Or like, even if people are saying that, can you understand like how like the net amount of violence would go down because of who is the main proponent of this violence? But like the hysteria that people are like, you're trying to get rid of everyone. It's like, no, you're saying that. You're saying that.
Not just his, but including Britain First rallies, for example. We've seen crowds chanting things like Allah is a paedophile, Muslim bombers off our streets, signs reading Stop Islam, Ban Islam.
We've got to clean our countries up. We've got to get everything out that does not know or receive Jesus Christ. Ban any type of public...
The tokenization, Pacific Islander people.
...expression in our Christian nations from other religions. Ban halal. Ban burqas, ban mosques, ban temples, ban shrines. We don't want those in our countries.
So what we're saying, I think
Can you imagine if people said, like, oh, we're going to ban all Christian churches? Like, what that kind of backlash would be. Even though that's what they claim people are saying. But can you imagine if people were actually saying that, what their reactions would be?
Going into hypotheticals, what about this? What about that?
We need a new prime minister that has guts and that's going to stand up for the British and send all of these rapist Muslims and dirty rugs back to their Sharia nations.
I think lots of Muslims think that hatred against them has become normalized.
Yeah, continually, like, grouping people as, like, being rapists. Yeah, just, like, so dehumanizing the language they use.
You don't...
At what time London became Pakistan? They told the world that Somalians, Afghanis, Pakistanis, and all of them, their rights supersede yours, the British public.
There is something specific that is happening at these marches that is different from the sorts of protests we've seen previously. People are not protesting about domestic issues. They're protesting about international issues.
I can't be the only person in this street here today that finds it hard to look at television coverage of a child starving to death with no baby formula and nothing else available, and the mother looking helplessly on who can do nothing about it, and doctors in tears because they haven't got what they need in order to save that beautiful child's life.
It is not okay. They're not just peaceful protests, they are truly hate marches calling for the end of Israel.
You're saying that all the people on there are conducting hate?
I think what you see, if you see those marches...
They took your guns, they took your swords, and they raped your women.
Oh
you
my
have
God.
nothing else to lose, but there's still hope. You are still the majority. So you either fight for this nation, or you let all of these rapists, Muslims, and corrupt politicians take over.
So on the basis of that logic, you would ban Tommy Robinson's rally, because some of the people, not all the people are racist and calling for appalling things, but some people are.
No, I've explained my position. It feels to me like we're going...
it.
Well, it feels like we're going round and round in circles. So I don't see the benefit in going on as to the one thing versus
I'm just wondering what the
another.
consistency is. That's all.
It is consistent.
Those
No, it's not,
in
bitch.
government, those in the media, those in law that did nothing when they could have done and should have done. They are the ones that history will condemn. They are the ones that will be seen have been marching on the side of the oppressor, not the oppressed. So today, send the loudest message.
When people are confronted with how illogical everything is, but we're just going round and round. Like, it doesn't make sense. Like, no, you don't make sense.
You can. To the people of Gaza and the West Bank and those in the refugee camps, you are not alone. We are with you. Freedom for Palestine. Thank you.
Mainstream media never analyzes or questions the fundamentals of the Western relationship with Israel. It falls on independent media to really pick apart what's going on there, and to look at it in depth and to question the basic assumptions that underlie it. On this issue, more than any other, we need independent media, and I would encourage you to subscribe via Patreon to Double Down News.
Subscribe to their YouTube channel. Thank you for sharing that, Lyndon. Yeah, it really is wild how similar all of the rhetoric is, which just goes to show how the desire for oppression, creating these hierarchies of human dignity to uphold these inequitable systems, it is just the same thing over and over again, of the same playbook. And it's not even interesting. like their arguments. They're not good ever because like who can justify what they're talking about, but like they don't have any sort of weight when they're held up under scrutiny. Double Down does so much. I get the most in-depth news from there. Okay. Thank you. I've seen some of their videos, but yeah, I'm happy to subscribe, especially getting more information that is very much suppressed in the US because once again, we're just propagandized beyond belief.
Is everybody, your first, second, your mom, dad, sibling, uncles, aunties, are all of them registered and voting? Work on that. We got to get back to familial organizing, reclaiming our democratic power in this moment in time.
Earlier this week, I spoke with Representative Shamari Figures and asked him, or well, rather told him, that some people are feeling even more, what's the word I'm looking for? I guess not encouraged to go to the polls because of everything that's going on right now. So what is it that you feel like can encourage people to actually go to the polls? For the people who are not understanding what is happening in this moment right now, what is it that you would say to those people to make sure that they go to the polls? Because next week the primaries are here in Alabama. Yes, and so the primaries are coming up in certain states, May 19th in Alabama, but also for the election in November as well. What do you want to tell those people who are not understanding this moment right now?
Yeah, this is one of the most significant moments that we will ever live through. People wonder about 1955, 1964, 1965. This is our moment. This is the one that 10 years, 20 years from now, we're going to look back on and say, what did we do? And in this moment, you need to say, I used the power that I did have, the power of the ballot, the power of democracy, to actually determine who is going to best represent me. When you don't go to the polls, what you are saying is, whoever does go is smarter than me, is more capable to determine my future, my children's future, my family's future. Don't give that agency to nobody. Claim that agency. Go to vote.org, claim your power, and then use it at the ballot box.
Thank you so much. Is there anything else that you want to tell the people before we wrap up?
Listen, don't give up the fight. Our ancestors have done too much for us to get to where we are, and we are not going to quit now.
Standing here with one of the leaders of the movement.
What a great interview. I want to see what some of these comments are. Solidarity forever. Illinois stands united with our brothers and sisters in Tennessee, Georgia, Mississippi, Louisiana, and Texas. Yeah, and it's not stopping in these places either. Attempts are being made all around the nation. Okay. So, I did want to show this, that like as we are seeing even more of this violent rhetoric, especially when it comes to white supremacists and Zionists who are intent on continuing this genocide, the continuation of demonizing people of color, but especially people who are Muslim, the Islamophobia that is pervasive through most Western nations. And also explains their complete indifference with what's happening in Iran, because they're like, oh, if it's happening to brown people who are Muslim, like, who cares? When in actuality, like, what is happening with, like, the global market and the violence, it hurts everyone, and it comes back with the imperialist boomerang to everyone else, but what do I know? I wanted to cover this. This happened earlier today. A shooting that happened at Islamic Center of San Diego. But I do have some other things for the AI data center. I'm thinking though, since there are so many updates going on with the data centers in Utah, a lot of Utah news to be going over with organizing and such, that I'm probably going to dedicate Mondays to international and national happenings, Tuesdays to what's happening in the state and updates with organizing. And Wednesday, Band Book Club, as usual. Thursday, like education on organizing and unionizing, like that specifically with news. So I am working on collaborating with more local organizers as well, just so that we can get out the news of what's going on, but especially in Utah. Because all of these mainstream media outlets are not interested in actually giving a realistic portrayal of what's going on the ground, but especially when it comes to having any sort of sympathy for working class people and labor organizing. So that is coming. But let's watch this before we change gears and get to the reading.
Live look right now at the scene where police cars and fire cars have swarmed the area. This is right off of the 805 at Balboa Avenue. If you know the area, you have seen that white building there. In addition to being a religious institution, it is also a school. San Diego police say there is an active shooter right now in that area. We have seen over the last few minutes footage of people being evacuated from the building. You see what looks like some of the school children crossing the street right now.
Jeez, poor kids. This footage is all over the place, but how kids in the US have just had to grow up with the normalization of violence, that they are specifically targeted by gun violence, especially kids who are in low-income areas, especially kids who are people of color, like all of these intersections of marginalization. It just is, like, it's shameful that this is just a normal occurrence.
Away to safety. We're trying to get as much information as we can from police and from the community at this hour as they work on this scene. The last we have heard from them is that it is still an active scene. The first call came in at about 11:40 this morning, so this has been going on for nearly 40 minutes, and there you see some police officers looking like they are barricaded behind a patrol car. It looks like one officer has a weapon drawn, or maybe more than one officer has a weapon drawn, pointing at that building. I've done some reporting from the Islamic Center before about the security measures that they have in place to prevent this exact type of thing from happening, or at the very least, if it does, to keep their people safe. And we saw a very large, very fast response from San Diego police. Those officers now moving away from the vehicle. This is the Islamic Center of San Diego. We're trying to find out if anyone was hurt, if anyone has been shot, where the shooter might be in relation to this center, and what is going on now. There you see more officers standing by, creating what looks like a perimeter in the area and getting one more person out there from the front gate, trying to keep as many people safe as possible.
Oh, whoops, my mic was off. Like, I don't like how they were manhandling her as well. Like, are they actually trying to keep her safe? Like, is that necessary? I don't think so. Like, how rough they were being with her, which just highlights the Islamophobia and discrimination that exists in the police force. Okay. So there are so many things happening that I want to cover, especially with what's happening with the data center. I did want to show, though, if people are interested in joining, you can, and of course this doesn't just affect everybody in Utah, but the resistance movement that is growing, this organizing group that I'm with, Utah Roots, Utah Residents, Organizing for Oversight, Transparency, and Stewardship. That's what it stands for. You can sign up with this Google form that we put together, because we are including people who are in Utah, outside of Utah, in other parts of the world, because as we can see, all of the interconnectedness of this global movement to have AI replace us, human labor, but just like human beings in general, we have a lot in common to be fighting for. So if you're interested, you can sign up there. We would love to have you, especially with any sort of experience. Like, we need numbers, and also we have way more talent than the people who are part of this ruling class. So, I did want to show this just as a quick video to get out more information before we move on to the reading. Because Elevate Utah, they're doing some really great work. I am not subscribed to them. And they do a lot of really great education, not only just with like the Utah political landscape and the environment, but particularly with this issue with the data center. And they have been focusing primarily on the Stratos data center that Kevin O'Leary, the Shark Tank shithead, that he is funding all of this. But he has called them out specifically, her, Gabby, saying that they are Chinese operatives. And they really are just presenting really great educational information. So I want to get this information out here because it also highlights the incestuous, corrupt nature of what goes on in Utah's politics, but how it is an example of these other systems and their corruption in the nation, but the world at large.
The House Mike Schultz owns 600 acres near the...
This is kind of quiet. I'm going to turn this up.
The Stratos project site.
Well, we were wrong. He actually owns 25,000 acres right near the Stratos data center site. So as we've been investigating all
Mike Schultz is the House Speaker, Utah House Speaker.
Of the threads with this Stratos data center site, we found that Mike Schultz owned 640 acres right here under an LLC called Mike Schultz Inc. But as it turns out, because some incredible journalists continued to look into this, he actually owns far more property under 2 other LLCs. So those properties are about 2,500 acres right up here near the border, another 1,300 acres that's even closer to the site than the previous spot that we looked at, and a whole other 23,000 acres right down here, right by Senator Scott Sandel's property that he also owns right next to the data center. Now this property, Speaker Schultz already owned far before the data center was even proposed. And this property was the one that he bought in January of 2025. Schultz says that he's in some trade negotiations for this parcel of land with some other parcel of land closer to up here, unclear on what that is. He also went on social media to defend the fact that he says that this land is very hilly, it's not developable, and that it's a whole 25-minute drive from the Stratos data center site. And while we're sure that developers have never dealt with hills or utilities,
yeah. And that just also goes to show how vast that land mass is. Like, okay, so you're driving 25 minutes, you're still on the area that this will be built.
These are roads before, and we believe all of that to be true. The question still remains that Utahns did not have a clear view of who owned the land, the power, and the process before this data center site was proposed. Now, Speaker Schultz did go on social media to remind us that he has no authority over this process, even though he is the Speaker of the House of Representatives. That he says he didn't know about this project until February, even though Kevin O'Leary says that he met with Speaker Schultz earlier than that. And that our findings are nonsense and ridiculous, and that we would rather take to social media to name-call, stereotype, and stoke the fire and controversy for clicks and exposure. Now, a few things on that. First of all, I would like to remind Speaker Schultz that we did not ask Kevin O'Leary to go on Fox News and call us Communist Party cells. In fact, we would much prefer that the attention of this was actually on the local environmental scientists that are doing the research about this, or the journalists who are discovering all of this information, or the local organizers who are organizing a referendum to take this away. Now, exposure is something, but...
Part of BEAR, the group, Box Elder... what does the A stand for? Box Elder... Accountability referendum. That's what it is.
Our money and access is far more, and the people pushing this project had way more of all 3 of those things before the public even knew that this existed.
Yep.
We have never once claimed to be journalists or to be unbiased. We are very much not neutral. We support candidates to try and make this state a better place, to try and make it not under supermajority control. And so while the speaker can call us ridiculous, I do want to remind everybody that this does seem to be working, because despite all of this, this is the first time that the speaker has publicly said that he would like real answers on water, air quality, and infrastructure, and that he demands studies and expects those to be taken seriously. Last week, Governor Cox was at a press conference saying that he's tired of our country taking years to get stuff done and that it's the dumbest thing ever. And now he is pushing for his...
Yep. He was like, it's the dumbest thing ever. Like, okay. You really can't find, like, a more articulate way of speaking?
His government entities to look into the environmental impacts, to push for the best environmental cooling technology, and to ensure that this doesn't have an impact on the Great Salt Lake. And our flip-flop wearing friend Kevin O'Leary's going on Tucker Carlson and getting absolutely cooked. So a month ago, none of this was being engaged publicly, and now we have elected officials in our state actually slowing down the process. And all of that credit goes to you. It goes to everybody who has showed up at these commission meetings. It goes to everybody who has filed their $15 protest form. It goes to everybody who's been paying attention to this issue across the country. So I just like to say our ridiculousness is working.
Fierce. Oh, great. Look at more of this. We need help. Black dust covers Oklahoma town as residents face renewed pollution fears. Yeah. See, the unchecked corporate greed, it is a global issue. Before we move to the reading, I did want to highlight that UTA workers, they are striking. They are currently working on an expired contract. So I'll be giving more information on Thursday as I'm doing labor organizing, education, and news, just to get more of the specifics there and collaborating with some people. But they had a big turnout on Sunday, so yesterday, for this picketing that was going on, that there were about 8 or 9 different unions also supporting people there. So like that solidarity is just really inspiring and amazing to see. But yeah, the media coverage has been minimal and very much like trying to both sides the issue. There are some people like not people, I guess ABC, they did some coverage that isn't quite as abysmal, but still, this is why we need to continue to talk about these things, especially in a way that is more unfiltered outside of these mainstream media, corporate media outlets, because this allows us to have a more realistic version of what's happening on the ground. So, sending solidarity to UTA workers and just how this organizing is extremely inspiring and is necessary in order to protect the working class against unlimited corporate greed. So, shall we get into the reading? Let's do it. So, in the previous chapter of The Scarlet Pimpernel, Sir Percy, he met at the inn where Chauvelin is. He originally sent out Degas, one of his people, to capture the Scarlet Pimpernel, or Percy, and that he was waiting for men to come back, like to surround the area, to come back and arrest him, and that Sir Percy was able to escape by giving Chauvelin some snuff that he filled with pepper. So it's trying to make it look like Chauvelin is not very smart, that it's only because they have a lot of people on their side that there is any sort of advantage that they have, while just completely disregarding all of the resources that are available to Sir Percy and the aristocratic class. Okay, We'll see how far I'm able to get with this. So this is chapter 26, and it's called The Jew. And so this already is setting us up for anti-Semitic tropes, just to throw that out there, just as a warning. Baroness Orsi was a Nazi sympathizer, and then when it became more unpopular as time went on in World War II, she was like, oh, I condemn this regime. But, like, how much do you? Because this is not the only situation in which she describes people who are Jewish in dehumanizing terms. But in order to deconstruct what's going on here, we have to be able to talk about it in a realistic fashion and condemn it. Because people who are claiming that, like, being pro-Palestine for Palestinian liberation, that is anti-Semitic, are completely ignoring, like, very real anti-Semitism that is happening, especially with this anger that is building against the Israeli state, how there is this conflation of Judaism and Zionism that the Israeli government has done intentionally, but how we have to make a distinction between what is anti-Semitism, real anti-Semitism, and what is Zionism. Okay, so this is chapter 26. It took Marguerite some time to collect her scattered senses. The whole of this last short episode had taken place in less than a minute, and Degas and the soldiers were still about 200 yards away from the Chat Gris. When she realized what had happened, a curious mixture of joy and wonder filled her heart. It was all so neat, so ingenious. Chauvelin was still absolutely helpless, far more so than he could have even... Nope. Far more so than he could even have been under a blow from the fist, for now he could neither see, nor hear, nor speak, whilst his cunning adversary had quietly slipped through his fingers. Blakeney was gone, obviously to try and join the fugitives at the Père Blanchard's hut. For the moment, true, Chauvelin was helpless. For the moment, the daring Scarlet Pimpernel had not been caught by Degas and his men. But all the roads and the beach were patrolled. Every place was watched, and every stranger kept in sight. How far could Percy go, thus arrayed in his gorgeous clothes, without being sighted and followed? Now she blamed herself terribly for not having gone down to him sooner, and given him that word of warning and of love, which perhaps, after all, he needed. Okay. He could not know of the orders which Chauvelin had given for his capture, and even now, perhaps... But before all these horrible thoughts had taken concrete form in her brain, she heard the groundings of arms outside, close to the door, and Degas' voice shouting, "Halt!" to his men. Chauvelin had partially recovered. His sneezing had become less violent, and he had struggled to his feet. He managed to reach the door just as Degas' knock was heard on the outside. Chauvelin threw open the door, and before his secretary could say a word, he had managed to stammer between two sneezes. "The tall stranger! Quick! Did any of you see him?" "Where, citoyen?" asked Degas in surprise. "Here, man, through that door, not 5 minutes ago." "We saw nothing, citoyen. The moon is not yet up, and you are just 5 minutes too late, my friend," said Chauvelin with concentrated fury. "Citoyen, You did what I ordered you to do," said Chauvelin with impatience. "I know that, but you are a precious long time about it. Fortunately, there's not much harm done, or it had fared ill with you, citoyen Degas." Degas turned a little pale. There was so much rage and hatred in his superior's whole attitude. Like, again, trying to emphasize that, like, oh, his anger and not catching this traitor to their cause, that he is evil and he needs to be feared. Degas turned a little... Oh, wait, I already said that. "The tall stranger, citoyen," he stammered, "was here in this room 5 minutes ago, having supper at that table. Damn his impudence! For obvious reasons, I dare not tackle him alone. Brogard is too big a fool, and that cursed Englishman appears to have the strength of a bullock, so he slipped away under your very nose." "He cannot go far without being sighted, citoyen." "Ah? Captain Jutley sent 40 men as reinforcements for the patrol duty, 20 down to the beach. He again assured me that the watch had been constant all day, and that no stranger could possibly get to the beach or reach a boat without being sighted. That's good. Do the men know their work? They have had very clear orders, citoyen, and I myself spoke to those who were about to start. They are to shadow, as secretly as possible, any stranger they may see, especially if he be tall, or stoop, as if would disguise his height. In no case to detain such a person, of course, said Chauvelin eagerly. That impudent Scarlet Pimpernel would slip through clumsy fingers. We must let him get to the Père Blanchard's hut now. There, surround and capture him. The men understood that, citoyen, and also that, as soon as a tall stranger has been sighted, he must be shadowed, whilst one man is to turn straight back and report to you. That is right, said Chauvelin, rubbing his hands, well pleased. Again, just like the continuing of the cartoonish villainy of like, oh, it's so evil to want human dignity for the working class. I have no further news for you, citoyen. Oh, I have further news for you, citoyen. What is it? A tall Englishman had a long conversation about 3/4 of an hour with a Jew, Reuben by his name. Okay, you couldn't just say, like, a man named Reuben, but again, this is anti-Semitism. Who lives not 10 paces from here. Yes, and? Queried Chauvelin impatiently. The conversation was all about a horse and cart, which the tall Englishman wished to hire, and which was to have been ready for him by 11 o'clock. It is past that now. Where does that Reuben live? A few minutes' walk from this door. Send one of the men to find out if the stranger has driven off in Reuben's cart. Yes, citoyen. Degas went to give the necessary orders to one of the men. Not a word of this conversation between him and Chauvelin had escaped Marguerite, and every word they had spoken seemed to strike at her heart with terrible hopelessness and dark foreboding. Not because they're speaking about someone in a dehumanizing manner. She had come all this way, and with such high hopes and firm determination to help her husband, with being a class traitor. And so far she had been able to do nothing, but to watch with a heart breaking with anguish the meshes of the deadly net closing round the daring Scarlet Pimpernel. He could not now advance many steps without spying eyes to track and denounce him. Her own helplessness struck her with a terrible sense of utter disappointment. The possibility of being of the slightest use to her husband had become almost nil, and her only hope rested in being allowed to share his fate, whatever it might ultimately be. For the moment, even her chance of ever seeing the man she loved again had become a remote one. Still, she was determined to keep a close watch over his enemy, and a vague hope filled her heart, that, whilst she kept Chauvelin in sight, Percy's fate might still be hanging in the balance. Degas had left Chauvelin moodily pacing up and down the room, whilst he himself waited outside for the return of the man whom he had sent in search of Reuben. Thus several minutes went by. Chauvelin was evidently devoured with impatience. Apparently he trusted no one. This last trick played upon him by the daring Scarlet Pimpernel had made him suddenly doubtful of success, unless he himself was there to watch, direct, and superintend the capture of this impudent Englishman. About 5 minutes later, Degas returned, followed by an elderly Jew, in a dirty, threadbare gabardine. So again, just not even saying like a man. This is intentionally discriminatory language that is dehumanizing. I already read this footnote, but it bears repetition in these anti-Semitic tropes. In this description, Orsi no doubt draws on the literary stereotype of Jews as they were portrayed in novels of the preceding century. This highly negative characterization, it's not just the preceding century, bitch. So this is, again, like calling out the academic who went through and was part of the editing process, writing the introduction as well. There is this softening of the language and the dehumanization that went through of like, oh, it's just of this time, rather than being like, no, bitch, she is an individual who is in a position of portraying people in a way that could be either humanizing or dehumanizing. She chose dehumanization, and that is immoral. This highly negative characterization under the guise of realism, yeah, that's not even a guise. That's what you are saying it is. Also conveys the prejudices not only of society, but those of Orsi herself. And not just of society, but of, like, particular groups of political thought. Like, groups of people with political intentions to dehumanize people. And Jewish people, in this particular instance. His red hair, which he wore after the fashion of the Polish Jews, with the corkscrew curls each side of his face, was plentifully sprinkled with gray. A general coating of grime about his cheeks and his chin gave a peculiarly dirty and loathsome appearance. So again, like the constant like anti-Semitism of calling people dirty, like all of these tropes of like oily, whatever, like that language is constantly used in anti-Semitic tropes in literature, especially British literature. But how there is this condemnation in general of poverty, of the working class, of demonizing people for these conditions that they are forced into because of these political ideologies and how society is structured, rather than admitting that people are forced to be in these conditions and that but again, this is what marginalization is, where people are forced to be in these conditions and then demonized for being in these conditions. He had the habitual stoop, those of his race, again, calling him being Jewish a race, racializing society, this idea of whiteness constantly being this ever-moving goalpost depending on white supremacist goals for the time. Affected in mock humility in past centuries, oh my god, before the dawn of equality and freedom in matters of faith, and he walked behind Degas with the peculiar shuffling gait which has remained the characteristic of the Jew trader in continental Europe to this day. No, that's a stereotype, and your prejudice is disgusting and very apparent, bitch. So again, this is overt anti-Semitism, where it is trying to say, like, all people were exhibiting this type of trait to justify their anti-Semitic policies, to justify the larger systems of human hierarchy that certain people are benefiting from, who are controlling the definition of what it means to be white. Chauvelin, who had all the Frenchman's prejudice against the despised race, like, not, so also saying that, like, Chauvelin is the main person who's showing prejudice when, like, Marguerite technically is the narrator at this point and is describing him in these anti-Semitic terms. Motioned to the fellow to keep at a respectful distance. The group of the three men were standing just underneath the hanging oil lamp, and Marguerite had a clear view of them all. "Is this the man?" asked Chauvelin. "No, citoyen," replied Degas. "Reuben could not be found, so presumably his cart has gone with the stranger. But this man here seems to know something which he is willing to sell for a consideration." Also, again, the anti-Semitic trope of, like, oh, like, this obsession with money, when in actuality, like, what happened to many people who were Jewish, that it was illegal for people to own land, to own livestock, that people were forced into money lending, as a form of occupation for actually having a living, and then were condemned for being money lenders and being like, oh, you just want money, you just care about this. No, it's because you force people to be in this occupation because of limited circumstances, and having limitations to choice is the definition of oppression, as told by bell hooks. Ah, said Chauvelin, turning away with disgust from the loathsome specimen of humanity before him. Oh my god. It's so disgusting. The Jew with characteristic patience, characteristic of, like, again, like, so with other ways in portraying the working class of like the only people who are viewed as good are the ones who are subservient, but this is continuing with anti-Semitic tropes. Stood humbly on one side, leaning on a thick knotted staff, his greasy, broad-brimmed hat, again saying greasy is deeply anti-Semitic, casting a deep shadow over his grimy face, again anti-Semitic, waiting for the noble excellency to deign to put some questions to him. So, again, like, just the continued discriminatory portrayal is disgusting. "The citoyen tells me," said Chauvelin peremptorily to him, "that you know something of my friend, the tall Englishman, whom I desire to meet. Mon Dieu! Keep your distance, man," he added hurriedly, as the Jew took a quick and eager step forward. Instead of just being like, the man, Reuben, or we don't even know his name. They didn't even bother to ask his name. "Yes, Your Excellency," replied the Jew, who spoke the language with that peculiar lisp which denotes Eastern origin. Oh my god. So all of like this conflation as well of identity when there is so much diversity within the Jewish diaspora. "I and Reuben Goldstein met a tall Englishman on the road, close by here this evening." And again, using like a lot of names that people are saying like are typically associated with people who are Jewish. "Did you speak to him?" "He spoke to us, Your Excellency." Also saying that like all people who are Jewish refer to white people as Your Excellency is discriminatory, where it is this idea of expected subservience. "He wanted to know if he could hire a horse and cart to go down to the St. Martin Road, to a place he wanted to reach tonight." "What did you say?" "I did not say anything," said the Jew in an injured tone. Again, we don't even get a name. "Reuben Goldstein, that accursed traitor, that son of Belial." Yeah, so like, this is a footnote. Biblical curse. Belial is commonly used as a synonym for Satan and also to connote wickedness. "Cut that short, man," interrupted Chauvelin roughly, "and go on with your story." "He took the words out of my mouth, Your Excellency, when I was about to offer the wealthy Englishman my horse and cart, to take him wheresoever he chose. Reuben had already spoken and offered his half-starved nag and his broken-down cart." So again, of like, oh, all you care about is money, but then, like, oh, you're poor, and you should be demonized for being poor. That's like, this is anti-Semitism. "And what did the Englishman do?" "He listened to Reuben Goldstein, Your Excellency, and put his hand in his pocket then and there, and took out a handful of gold, which he showed to that descendant of Beelzebub." Again, like, oh, people can't have, like, a normal conversation, constantly using these tropes of language that are associated with being Jewish rather than, like, having people, like, you can tell Baroness Orsi was not speaking to people who were Jewish because she is using all of these very stereotyped portrayals and also ideas about language, how people are discussing just everyday topics rather than being like a normal human being using humanizing language. Telling him that all this would be his if the horse and cart were ready for him by 11 o'clock. And of course, the horse and cart were ready? Well, they were ready in a manner, so to speak, Your Excellency. Reuben's nag was lame as usual. She refused to budge at first. It was only after a time, and with plenty of kicks, that she at last could be made to move, he said with a malicious chuckle. Oh my god. So just being like, oh, we enjoy cruelty, when in actuality, who is being cruel in this situation? Then they started? Yes, they started about 5 minutes ago. I was disgusted with that stranger's folly. An Englishman, too. He ought to have known Reuben's nag was not fit to drive. So also this continued idea of like, oh, people are inherently deceptive and trying to trick people, that this is an anti-Semitic trope, also a common trope when it has to do with people of color in general. But if he had no choice? No choice, Your Excellency, protested the Jew in a rasping voice. Did I not repeat to him a dozen times that my horse and cart would take him quicker and more comfortably than Reuben's bag of bones? He would not listen. Reuben is such a liar and has such insinuating ways. Yeah, like coercion and lying. This is anti-Semitism. The stranger was deceived. If he was in a hurry, he would have had better value for his money by taking my cart. You have a horse and cart too, then? Asked Chauvelin peremptorily. Aye, that I have, Your Excellency. And if Your Excellency wants to drive, do you happen to know which way my friend went in Reuben Goldstein's cart? Thoughtfully, the Jew rubbed his dirty chin. And the anti-Semitism is just, like, so wild. This is what anti-Semitism looks like. To justify demonizing people, to justify oppression and genocide and the active discrimination with law, that these people, that this is the contrast between the people that we were seeing in that other video of saying like, oh, these are hate marches, being for like pro-Palestine, that like this is the difference. This is what anti-Semitism looks like. Okay. Actually, this is all I have time for right now. Reading this shit is... I hate reading this shit. Okay. We'll stop right there. That's all I have time for. But just keeping that in mind, that especially as a very real anger is happening against the Israeli state and its genocidal policies, that it is the aircraft carrier of the US empire, and that we should not conflate being Jewish, Judaism, the religion, and also ethnic identity with Zionism, that these have to be separated, because we are seeing these right-wing opportunists, these right and white wing people are taking advantage of this growing anger and using it to justify their anti-Semitism. So we need to call that out and beware of this happening currently and how it has been done in the past. Because we all deserve human dignity. That should not have to be said, but here we are. Okay. We'll continue going through everything that's going on with the AI data center in Box Elder, the Stratos project, as well as these other data centers and nuclear power plants that are being created around the state and the nation and the world at large. So we'll get to some of that and then continue with the reading tomorrow. But thank you for being here. It was good chatting with you all. I hope you have a good rest of your day, evening, wherever you are. And I will see you soon. Okay, bye.